7 o'clock, and it's September 15th, and I called the Hanover Borough Council Workshop Finance Personnel Committee to order. I need to, first of all, public comment. We'll do public comment first. Anyone out there, anyone here who would like to make any public comment?
There's no one online?
Anyone, is anybody online? Nobody?
No one online.
Nobody wants to make public comment. Okay, that's a good thing. No, it's not.
Are you disappointed?
It's always good. I'm disappointed, yeah. I do need to make acknowledgement of an executive session. We did have an executive session this evening beginning at 6:15, which included the following items: to discuss personnel matters, section 708A, 1 and 5, and to hold information strategy negotiation session related to negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement, section 708A, 2 and 5. Moving on to the consent agenda, prior to any recommendations to approve that, I need to announce there's a correction on page 818 of the minutes, page 5, library work group, paragraph 3, line 3, quote, the timeline until 2022. That's a correction, in case anyone read that and wondered why that wasn't there. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda for this evening?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. And we have a presentation from our Honorable Solicitor reviewing the new Sunshine Act requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. So I handed out a two-page memorandum that hopefully summarizes a two-page law. That's the way lawyers do things. You just make it longer. So,
Two-page memorandum for a two-page law. Okay.
So Act 65, which came into effect on August 30th of this year, amends the Sunshine Act and really amends the way the borough and other agencies do business publicly. The act applies not only to borough council, but all committees of the borough that are authorized to take official action or provide advice on matters of agency business. Under Act 65, we must pre-post our agendas, so not only applicable to Borough Council, but also its committees. And that agenda must list the subject of the deliberation where Borough or its council or its committees will be taking official action. They must be posted on the website no later than 24 hours in advance of the time of the meeting.
Does that eliminate our having to spend all that money on putting it in the evening sun?
No. Our agendas are not published in the Evening Sun.
Oh, sorry.
Just the advertisement in the meetings.
Hopefully okay.
It must be posted at the location of the meeting, that is at the borough building, and it must be made available to all individuals who attend. Provided that the agency complies with this pre-posting, it may take official action on the posted items. Conversely, if it is not complied with or there's additions, the borough cannot take official action on those matters. As with all laws, there are exceptions. So there are three major exceptions and one kind of like, okay, if you want to do it anyway, you can kind of exception. So the three recognized exceptions are emergency business, and obviously that is, under, states of emergency where there's a clear and present danger. Business that actually arises 24 hours before the meeting. So the business could arise after the posting of the agenda. However, in order to take action on that, the matter has to be de minimis in nature and not involving the expenditures of funds or entering into contracts or other agreements. So, it's a very, very limited exception of those things that come up within 24 hours of meeting. The third exception is business that arises during the meeting. So in the course of a meeting, a resident or a taxpayer may bring a matter of agency business before you that's not listed on the agenda. And if that's the case, borough can take action, but it's limited. The action is limited to referring the matter to staff for the purposes of researching the matter for inclusion on the next agenda, or if the matter is de minimis in nature and does not involve the expenditure of funds or entering into a contract. So those are the three recognized exceptions. We can take agency business under those exceptions. Now, what happens if during the meeting or any time prior to 24 hours of the meeting, the agency wants to amend its agenda for any other reason? So something comes up, right, that doesn't fit one of these exceptions. The borough can amend its agenda at the meeting and take official action on that matter. However, in order to do so, you have to do some things. The first thing is you need a motion to amend the agenda, and that has to be announced at the meeting, and you have to state the reason for the amendment. Then, within 24 hours of the meeting, the amended agenda must be posted on the agency's website and at the principal office. So I would say also that if a new matter comes up before council that's either under one of the exceptions or the amendment of the agenda exception, that we provide public comment on that matter before we take any official action.
But you can take some action on something, okay.
Yes, provided
Oh,
we
yeah, there it is,
amend
sorry.
the agenda. So that's the summary of Act 65.
This almost pretty much removes new business from, because you really can't have new business now, can you?
New just means it didn't appear on a former agenda. but it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah.
Can't have any.
Yeah, so if you list it on the agenda 24 hours in advance, you can have as much new business as you want. It's
Yeah.
just, it limits the amount of,
Urgent business.
Nan and Sam, given this and given our experience in the last year, or whatever, how often are we in violation of this? Not that often, are we?
We frequently have conversations among borough council members, for example, the noise ordinance that are not on the agenda. That can't be any longer. So it's unfortunate, but we will do our very best to, and we do anyway,
No, I
to
get
get
it.
everything on, and then 24 hours ahead of time. As you can see in red, there's some changes this time.
Right,
This-
so those would be the example, the
Yeah.
stuff in red, okay.
I think it won't be hard to comply with. What would be hard is to administer any changes after the 24 hours.
That's our most common thing, I think, is just that, oh, about the last minute, we're going to add that to the agenda. 99% of the time, it's really no harm, no foul. It's just something super simple to get either a permit approved or, hey, but that's usually,
Some sort of event or something.
that's all I've seen in the past 4 years.
I do want to clarify that the discussion on noise is actually to get it on the agenda.
That's a good point, and I think that's something you should discuss with the solicitor.
Talk
What if
about
you
that.
want to get something on the agenda? How do you
We're
deal with
just trying to get
that?
it on
Yeah.
the agenda, and you have to, we have to
Exactly
coordinate
right.
it.
Yeah.
For the October.
So
board
it wasn't a
meeting, so we actually
discussion of
okay
the
there.
the technical
right.
merits of it, it's just,
Right.
we're trying to get it on for
And
conversation.
probably your best route to get something on the agenda is to call the manager, and then the manager will put it on the agenda. That's the easiest way, if you call in advance. But you won't be able to do it at the meeting anymore, and I'm not, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not looking to do that, but I figured you'd go to the chair of the committee.
chairperson.
Or the chair of the committee. But
yeah,
then that's a discussion we're going to have later in the meeting, because
Okay.
we're kind of going in a number of directions that may be difficult to manage, and,
Two different ways to get it on.
yeah.
Yeah, so,
Dory does a good job reminding us if there's a change, because you have to watch then of the change before you come, so in case there's something on there you might want to know about.
And also, I think I also notified president and vice chair too. So I covered my bases.
Yeah, cover your bases.
Well, email's amazing stuff, right?
I covered my bases.
because Act 65 only applies to matters of agency business where the borough is taking official action, those terms are important. So
What does agency mean?
in paragraph 6, or what does the word agency mean? It includes the borough and any of its committees.
Okay.
But agency business, which is defined in paragraph 6 of my memorandum and also in the Sunshine Act, is the framing, preparation, making and enactment of laws, policies, regulations, and things like that. So, like, I imagine that during a normal borough council meeting, the discussion may lead into other things, which is not a violation of this, except if it gets further down the road. So as soon as you start like discussing new policy and things like that, that's probably a no-no. If you're talking about, hey, here's an issue, we want to put it on the agenda, to me, that's, like for a future meeting, that's more procedural, not substantive, and go through the proper channels that the borough has set up for that.
So if we're having a meeting talking about, I don't know, ABC, and then that leads into, oh, well, then maybe we need to spend $100,000 on this, we could then put out an agenda for a meeting for the next day and then resume that discussion, or
Well, you'd have to,
No.
you have to advertise.
Advertise,
yeah.
okay, all right,
Right.
good point. So we couldn't, it has to be, the agendas are for, they're also advertised for the meetings.
Right.
I'd like to add, I hope everyone's viewing this as a help rather than a hindrance. This is a way to administer more effective, efficient government. This will
Right, it's a
keep
transparency
counselors
thing.
And
talking about
transparency,
council
too.
business
I
and not
agree.
going down rabbit holes of tangents and wasting everyone's time. If it goes too far astray from the written communicative agenda, we have the responsibility as chairs of our various meetings to say, great, interesting, but we got to limit the discussion now, put it on a later agenda, advertise it, and then
We'll
talk
put that
about it.
agenda for the next meeting, if you will.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it would be very important, then it could follow the normal course, not the next day.
Usually, to your point, nothing that earth-shattering comes up
Not many.
that we're going to have to spend $100,000 tomorrow on
Right.
that we didn't know about yesterday.
Right, it's not a.
And there is a clause for emergency, if there's some terrible emergency, so there is a clause for that.
Broken water
Yeah.
main, maybe.
Right,
Which is
something like
next.
that. Yeah, something like that.
Anything else, solicitor?
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
I think Mr.
Anything
Schultz
else?
is done. He's
Okay.
yielded his time.
All right, thank you very much for clearing that up for us. Next, we have a Hurricane Ida and Stormwater Planning update, and an update on the Frederick Street water main break. Thank you, Eric.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I am well.
Good.
So, the manager asked if I would put together sort of a brief presentation, and I will keep it brief. We are going to talk a little bit about Hurricane Ida, and then I wanted to keep council in the loop on what the Stormwater Authority is doing as far as strategies moving forward, certainly when we talk about dealing with flooding and things like that. So, I have a couple slides here that will kind of walk you through where we're going with that. Next slide, please. So Hurricane Ida, how did we fare? First of all, we fared very well because the borough departments took a lot of proactive steps ahead of the storm, certainly having notice, unlike those storms that just kind of pop up and hit you. This one, because it was able to be tracked, we were able to stay in front of it. We got out, we cleaned inlets, we did inspections. Certainly all the different departments worked together very well to make sure that we were properly prepared for it. Then during the event, certainly all the departments were sort of patrolling around, talking to one another, making sure inlets were opened up, outlets were opened up. If we saw debris, we were getting it removed, just kind of keeping an eye on how things were starting to shape up through the storm. We did pretty well because the storm event was really sort of slow to develop. It didn't really kind of punch us in the face right away. It was kind of a slow developing thing. And the way our system works in Hanover is, for the initial part, if it can stay slow, we can actually stay up with it. It's when we get it really, really quickly that it gets overwhelmed very fast. But if it's a relatively slow storm, we're in pretty good shape. What we saw then was certainly as the rain then intensified, and that happened around 3 to 4 o'clock, we then started to see some of that localized flooding where the system just could not take it anymore. We started to shut streets down and things like that. And then the final hours of the rain event, it really, really got pretty bad and dicey. And the water plant had to shut down. The treatment plant started to shut down. We couldn't stay in front of it. We kind of were in a damage control mode at that point.
What was the official water, the rainfall depth?
Just a little bit south of 7 inches within a total of, it kind of spanned across 2 days, so it depends how you look at it. One part of it fell in a 24-hour period. We got about 4 or 5 inches in one, and then we got the rest of it in the other part of it.
I think we were lucky.
My rain gauge.
I don't know, I had 9
Okay.
because I had a dump, but
I had like a
I don't
picture
know what
pulled up one day with
who
7
knows?
inches.
So anyway,
Wind.
moving on to the next slide. So when we think about the borough and we start to think about flooding and strategies and what we do, I think it's important to keep a couple things in mind. The first of all is that the borough of Hanover is divided basically into three main watersheds. We have the Plum Creek watershed, the Oil Creek watershed, and the North Tributary watershed. Those are really what constitutes where all the water that falls in the borough, how it's moving and where it's moving. Next slide. And then the system that moves that water in and around those watersheds within the borough, and actually took this slide from when you guys did your stormwater program fee development. We did an inventory, and you have about 1,600 inlets. You've got about 286 drainage points, which are combinations of outfalls and cross points where it goes from into Penn and then back out of Penn and into ours. We have about 90 miles of borough streets. It's important to remember our streets act as conduits for run water too. They're not just for vehicle traffic. Pipes, we have about 33 miles of stormwater pipes within the borough, which is just astounding when you start to think about how much we're not really putting each year into replacing all that. So it starts to pile up. And then we have just a little bit shy of about 3 miles worth of streams that work their way through the borough as well. Next slide. So the principal stormwater issues that we face, we have rain events now that are much more intense than they used to be. So like I said, if we can go slow, we can kind of stay in front of it, but that's not what we typically see. We see these summer storms, they pop up really quick, very, very intense. Back one slide, please. We have an aging infrastructure. We are beyond our design life for most of the infrastructures in the borough. There are some sections where it is newer, but for the most part, we have a very aged infrastructure. What that means is we have pipes that are starting to rot, they're starting to fall apart, they're just not able to keep up and do what they need to do. We have development has certainly outpaced the stormwater investment. So as we've taken properties and we've developed them in impervious coverage, we've gotten much, much better more recently now in staying on top of developers to manage their runoff. But previously that wasn't always the case with things. Until the stormwater program was developed, the borough actually did lack a very sort of dedicated resource or funding. And so we have now in place, obviously, with the stormwater program fee, we have a certain crew that goes around, they take care of the inlets, and they do all the video inspections and things like that. And then finally, lack of proper infrastructure. As you're all aware, we have whole sections of the community, there just isn't anything. It looks like an anomaly. When you look at the GIS data, you'll see a system all around, and you'll just see this sort of black hole. And it's because the way that we managed it prior was to simply let it all be surface flow, as opposed to putting it in inlets and getting it through the ground. Next slide. So the Stormwater Authority has really been having a lot of discussions about how to develop a new strategy to deal with these things. How do we take the money that comes in the stormwater program fee, and how do we use that authority as a tool to kind of move us forward? And so basically what has come out of it is the authorities commissioned 3 studies to be done. 2 of them are actually complete. The other one will be done by the end of December. What that means is each one of those studies looks at the watershed, those 3 watersheds that I showed you prior. And what we're doing is we're developing a highly technical computer model that looks at not only the surface flooding, but we're also looking at the pipes, and we're looking at them together. And that's important because a lot of people will just look at surface flooding, and they're not necessarily thinking about the pipes and things that are underground. To look at those 2 things together really gives us an accurate picture on what's going on there. Next slide. So what are the models doing for us? Because obviously, one of the things we get a lot of times from the public is, wow, geez, we're spending money on all these models, and what is it we're getting out of it? Or are we just making more books and studies to sit on shelves? And that's absolutely not the case. So what the models do is, for one, they actually help graphically depict the locations and severity of flooding issues. So they're showing us what a lot of people say, oh, well, I already knew it flooded down on Main Street. Okay, but did you know how far back it floods and with what regularity it floods? And actually, with these models, we can go down to such detail we can tell you how deep it is going to be in different storm events based on intensity. The models also allow us to look at newer technologies, things like green infrastructure. We can actually build those into the models to see what kind of impact they might have before we would make those investments into those things. We can run desktop scenarios now, so instead of just going out and saying, hey, let's get that pipe out of the ground, let's put a bigger one in, we can actually run that through the computer model and see, are we going to get that bang for the buck that we think we should be getting? And so ultimately what happens is these models really help inform the decisions that we're making about our stormwater investments. And then finally, models can be used to improve our chances of grant funding. So what happens is we go to these grant agencies. If you can go in there and say, look, not only are we asking you for money to help with this project, we can show you that this project is going to have this benefit for us. That's a higher level of investment than somebody who just has their hand out and says, I'd like some money to put some pipe in the ground. Next slide. So some of the typical results that come out, and I screenshot this actually out of the model. So the first on the left is a cross-sectional view where we can actually look at a cross-section of our piping and we can actually see where it's flooding, we can see how deep it's flooding, and we can see, is that an isolated bottleneck or is that something that's just going on throughout the entire system? Then, as I mentioned, we can also look at the physical extents of surface flooding. And so what that means is you can actually see, for any event that you'd like to, you can see how far does that water spread around, and we can actually color code it based on depth. And so that middle graphic there, you can see those different colors. What that's showing you is it shows you where the deepest parts of that expected flooding are going to occur, and then it shows you how it kind of fans out to nothing. And then finally, we can see the proximity of flooding areas. So now what we can do is if we want to focus on a particular area, we can actually go in there and see all of the areas that are flooding. So we know, are we just getting one area, or are we getting potentially a bunch of areas fixed when we look at those things? Next slide. So really, so where do we go from here? What do we do with these models? So basically, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to finish out the model that we're working on now. So like I said, that'll be done by the end of December. And with that now, we'll have a full complement of models that cover the entire borough. And then the next step in that process is to then go out and find a consultant who can help us take those models, and the hard part's already been done. The part of figuring out where the flooding is and how often and what triggers it and all that, that's been done. Now we need somebody to come in and say, okay, what are the best fixes for those? And so you get a consultant who will come in and we'll actually give them that model and say, run the scenarios, look at the different things, tell us how do we get the most return on our investment for stormwater improvements. Once you have that, then you can work into the cost. You can start to figure out what does that look like from a cost perspective, and then you can start looking at your funding strategy. You know, is it your stormwater program fee? Is it grant funding? Is it American Rescue Act funding? Is it, what sorts of funding things can you bring forward? And as I said before, when you have these studies done, and especially if you've got a consultant who said, look, these are the things that are going to get you this return on your investment, you can leverage those then with the grant agencies to get money. And that's ultimately what I've heard, certainly from council, and we've had these discussions at the authority as well. That's a common goal that's shared by both groups, is we want to leverage $1 to get $4, if we can do that. So that's, any questions on the stormwater or IDA, any of that? And then I have one last slide on the water main break.
My experience, been through several of these, and AJ, certainly your group deserves a lot of credit. The place was cleaned up really well in advance. We weren't too far into the leaf dropping season, but the places like, right by our house at, Grant and Clearview, that whole intersection, I've seen it come up like almost into Rick Rohr's yard, and there was nothing like that. I think we were also fortunate we didn't have the wind. I have some friends in Bucks County, and it's like night and day.
Yeah.
So, but I think everybody did a really great job. Did we incur any damage at our major plants like water and sewer?
The water plant didn't have any permanent damage. The sewer plant, we had some equipment and sensors and things that we're working through now to get. We're full up and fully operational, but we are going back now and having to fix
Nothing big, though.
Is that because of the infiltration of the stormwater or the rainwater?
the damage that we saw.
Just the fact that it was running much harder than it should is
Was,
that,
yeah. I mean, our average is anywhere from 4 to 6 millions a gallon a day, and we peaked down at 28.
Is
So
that what it was?
Yikes.
our plant was screaming. I mean, the
Wow.
pumps were going full, trenches were full.
Crazy.
We, like I said, at one point we basically just had to kind of shut down.
you got out of a pipe.
Anyway, all right.
So I
Last.
just have one question. When you
Yes.
get all this
I
done
underestimated
and you have
it. I
models,
thought it was-
we'll be able to then prioritize your areas so you know what to do first? Is that part of the
Correct.
plan?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. From
we're
this basic,
saturated.
and again, like I said, the hard work's kind of been done because as these studies are being done on each of the 3 watersheds, they are calling out all what they're calling the hot spots, and they're showing us like, hey, this is a really bad flooding area, and here's why it floods. But it stopped short of saying, we think you should do this next. And I didn't want them to do that. I wanted them just focused on what is the problem, where is it, and what is the extent of it. The next step then will be to get a fresh set of eyes in there to say, okay, now you know where this is, how do we fix this?
Think about it
And a
like
hot
this,
spot
Barb.
doesn't necessarily mean that's the problem area.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
yeah,
Because of the way we're
It's
out.
from uphill.
Far away,
Yep.
yeah, right.
Or think about it like this, the sewer plant, to whatever it said, you know, our average day is 4 to 5 million, call it 4.5, and our water production's
Yeah.
about the same. So in a perfect world, when it rains, the sewer plant wouldn't have any more water than it does when it doesn't rain. And the difference from 4 to 28, or, you know, 24 million gallons a day is rain, or
That we're paying to
Some-
treat.
Right.
correct.
It's a lot of money.
It's actually very cool, Barb. You can put like, okay, well, if we take this 18-inch pipe and replace it with a 24, and then we're going to, so if we get 2 inches of rain in an hour, what does that do for us? If we get 4 inches of rain, what does it do for us?
Cool.
And- Yeah, it's fun.
Good. It's good planning.
All right, next slide, which is on the water main break. So I wanted to just throw in some here just to keep council up to date. So earlier this week, obviously, we had a water main break here in front of the office. A couple of details that came out of that. The pipe section that actually broke was from around, our best guess is around 1896. When we went back and looked at some of the system mapping on it. It was last cement lined in 2000, so about 20 years ago. Important thing to remember, cement lining is not a structural thing. Sometimes people say, oh, you cement lined it, it should be impenetrable. The cement lining is more of a water quality and hydraulics issue. It's not necessarily a structural thing. I mean, you're talking about a very thin layer in there. The pipe was cast iron, which unfortunately what happens with cast iron is it does just rupture very spontaneously and rip open like we saw. So what we put back in is the industry standard. It's class 52 ductile iron pipe. It does have a cement lining already inside of it. Roughly we put in about 150 lineal feet of that total.
What's the difference
What size
between
pipe
ductile
was
and
it?
cast iron without?
8 inch.
Engineering.
I'm sorry?
What's the difference between ductile and cast iron? I guess the ductile iron's more
The
ductile.
means by which they make it. It has to do with how they make it, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
You might not have the exact answer, you can ballpark it or get back to me. How many miles of line do we have that is 1896 or older?
I don't even have a good guess for that. Yeah, I know that we are working right
150
now.
less.
150 less than we did before. But I mean, these things are
X minus 150.
exceptionally less expensive to fix proactively.
Yeah, and one of
than
the
they are
things
reactively.
that we are doing is we are in the midst right now of a prioritization effort to try and call out those pipes that we know are old, that are susceptible to breaking, have what we call a high degree of criticality, meaning they occur near a hospital, a school, a senior citizen. So we have found a way to take all that data and dump it in a pot and have it help us decide where we should be making investments in water, and we are working through that right now to develop all of these, as Sam talks about, these capital improvements plans moving forward. That's what's behind the scenes driving which pipes we're picking. That's not a dartboard on the wall kind of a thing. We're trying to be very methodic and strategic about how we pick pipes and what we pick out.
What's our annual CapEx for water line replacement about, Sam?
It's severely spiked in the last couple of years as we spend down reserves.
3 million?
We had, we're projecting future years at about 2 million. And again, it's a pretty conservative figure based on PUC rate increases, and then obviously what the board does with in-borough rates. And that's an in-borough line, so.
And how
we
many
could use
miles
the
of
money.
pipe did you say we had of water line? Water supply line for
Oh, that was in the
potable
previous-
water?
Oh, that was stormwater.
That was
It
stormwater.
was stormwater.
Right, okay, never mind.
Yeah, I don't have the
I was just wondering, at $2 million a year, and
How
how many feet does $2 million get us?
It's nothing, it's
We just
pennies.
keep doing
We're
pennies.
just tossing pennies. I don't-
What I can tell you is, based on our network size at this time, slightly higher than a $3 million investment would be roughly about an 80 to 100-year turnover plan. So, these pipes typically have that life of 80 to 100 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Just north of $3 million would put us where we need to be to turn it over in that
And that'd have to
timeframe.
be adjusted for inflation, obviously.
All right.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Eric? Many people saw the borough at work, and I had many comments from people like, I can't believe they're done already. So they're very impressed with how quickly it was done. It was a big hole.
I got a lot of compliments as
I
well,
did too.
Public Works and Eric and.
Yeah. So thank you. Thanks.
Say
Okay.
repay?
As part of every budget year, we have to take a look at staffing proposals, and you did get some information in your packet regarding staffing proposals, and we had proposals from 3 different groups. So I guess we'll start with the police. Come on down.
Thank you.
Yeah. Want to elaborate on your memo that you gave us, please?
Yes, as you all know, there's a memo provided. A little background, I'm requesting this year to fill 2 vacancies in the police department. This request is based on, in 2017, there was a management study done on the police department that was requested of council or by council. At that time, we had 26 sworn personnel, and that study recommended no changing to the staffing of the police department. Since that time, we are now down to 23 sworn personnel, 3 less. As a result, one detective has been pulled from the detective's office in 2019. That detective was primarily a drug investigations detective, and he was put back on the street. Since that time, we had a retirement in 2020 with Sergeant Culp. That was not replaced, and we had an officer leave this year. With that officer leaving this year, the beginning of 2021, the patrol squads had 1 sergeant and 4 patrol officers on each squad. One squad is down a patrol officer. I referenced here about 2 months ago about evidence tech John Roser turned 70 in August. Based on my concerns that he will soon be leaving us, the beginning of October, I am pulling another officer from the patrol squad to put in the detective division to start learning off of John. This officer has had prior training in evidence scene processing, latent print processing, etc., photography, but I think it's imperative that I get him in there and start learning John's role before he leaves. That will leave two squads down, an officer from where we currently were. I also have next month in October another officer that will have his time in to retire. That's the potential of a 3rd officer being down.
And it takes a year to
Roughly the process takes a year, a little less if they are already certified. So, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. The council did, approve the certifying of a list. I can tell you from the list, it ended up a list of 24 candidates. We are doing backgrounds on 4, and that is all that remains on the list. So
Anyone besides white
employed
men?
somewhere else, or?
some were employed elsewhere. Some were doing research, had failed the background elsewhere. Some chose not to reply to our offer. I had 2 that initially said yes, and then they got to thinking. They were over 2 hours away. They really didn't want to move this way.
Any diversity in that group?
There are two males and 2 females. One of the males is his primary language is Spanish. He's Costa Rican descent. So having 5 officers on the patrol squad allows us to be proactive versus reactive. And by reactive, I mean if we allow our squads to get down to the bare minimums, where their minimum staffing, which right now is 3 officers per shift, all they're going to be doing is answering calls and writing reports. So while there's some good ideas as far as quality of life issues and addressing quality of life issues like the brake retardant ordinance, noise ordinance, some other things we've done over the last several years, that's nice to have it on the books, but who's going to enforce it? Complaints like speeding, drugs, that's all going to take backseat if we get down to bare minimum. Also, community details that we conduct, community policing details, and events we attend. Our community policing areas program that's been well received by the public, where officers actually get out and sit in the neighborhoods and walk. Again, that is all going to take backseat. Also, I believe minimum staffing of 3 officers, having 5 officers per shift reduces overtime costs related to backfilling for vacation, sick time, and training. I think if we allow the department to get down to the point where we're at minimum staffing and we're having to backfill shifts, My concern is, officer safety in the form of fatigue, our quality of service to the community. I mean, don't get me wrong, you call 911, we're going to show up. But when you start getting fatigue, lack of training, the quality of policing, I believe, will go down. Come fatigue, comes mistakes, comes possibly, do they fall asleep in an accident? And then do we look at a lawsuit or paying more than the overtime itself? I sort of crunched some numbers. When I started here in 1997, our annual call volume for service was around 7,500. Last year it was down a little under 11,000, and I believe a lot of that had to do with COVID. This year we're on track to do a little over 11,500 calls for service. We've been as high as 14,000 calls for service within the past 6 years.
It's interesting because the population's been basically static that whole time.
Yeah.
You have a breakdown of those calls per shift, the time?
I don't, but I can get those.
That'd be
Okay.
beneficial.
So as you know, the arbitration came through and the officer's been awarded 12-hour shifts. So again, that's going to be something contractually we have to abide by. Just breaking that down with if you had only 4 officers versus 5 officers per shift, that equates to 35,000 and some 40 hours per year, which equates to 2,920 shifts. If you take away officers from contractual obligations such as vacation, floating holiday time, and mandatory training and the level of training we do now, at the beginning of the year, you're starting off 405 shifts at minimum staffing, which means if there's a sick call or something else comes up, you're backfilling for overtime right off the bat.
There's 405 shifts of training.
Training, vacation time, if
Okay.
that's mandated by the officers.
So it's like 11, 12% of the total.
So, now that's not to say that's all going to be used. Looking at if half of those times are used, you're looking at $143,000 in overtime based on the average overtime rate currently.
Is that the time and a half, or is that just the
It's
overtime
time and a half.
component?
Yeah, it would be the time and a half.
So it's really the only incremental cost is the halftime. You were going to pay them anyway.
Well, no, they're working above and beyond what they were working, so they're actually making their time and a half. So it would be $143,000.
Do you have your overtime costs for this past year?
I think it was somewhere around 15,000, but that's not including court time. Looking at figures this year, to hire an officer with one officer with salary and benefits, I believe it's around $96,500. So,
That's starting with benefits.
yes, that's benefits as well included.
What's the cost again?
$96,500
With benefits?
with benefits. Yeah, $58,700 salary and $37,000, almost $800 with benefits.
But if you get someone with more experience, it's going to cost you more money.
Yes, yes.
But the benefits are pretty much static.
So at the end of the day, I believe it comes down to the services that the council feels that the citizens need, require. When comparing to what it costs to run the police department. Again, obviously, the lower number that we go, the less services that we will be able to provide in a timely manner. And, the quality of life issues that are so important to people will take back seat to answering calls, investigating more serious crimes, and writing reports.
Your evidence technician now is half-time, is that correct?
He does 26 hours a week.
How many?
Yes, 26 hours a week, and it's a
Then you're gonna
full-time.
have a
It's a
full-time-
full-time job. Yeah, he's backlogged and has been backlogged for some time.
Could you give us a job? I have no idea what an evidence technician does. I'm evidence
Was he a
and,
former?
Put stuff away.
Chain of
Yeah,
command,
yes, sir.
chain of
He
command,
retired.
not just
What
put
do they
stuff
do?
away, it's evidence, it's chain of command.
That, he takes stuff to the Pennsylvania State Police Lab, he does evidence processing, when the officers bring stuff in, he'll process for latent prints, that type of stuff. So, but yeah, I do have if you want to see a job description, we do have one.
I just like to learn what they do.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's a little of a lot of different stuff.
So yeah, John did retire. John did retire here from the police department in 2009. He was
Okay.
a detective at the time and was doing that as a detective,
Right.
when he retired.
Still.
So is there any possibility, this is just throwing this question out, is there any possibility you could wait until you implement your new shifts and see how that works out and monitor overtime and come back to us?
I mean, that is a possibility. I'm looking at, to try to keep it fair across the board with the squads.
Sure.
I'm looking at a vacation jumper type scenario.
What is the current shift arrangement compared to the 12 hours?
Right now, it's an 8-hour shift. It's 4 different 8-hour shifts. They rotate every 28 days.
And the 12 hours how many will there be?
It'll be 12 on, 12 off, mirroring shifts. So, you still have 4 squads.
Okay, still have 4.
Yeah.
All things being equal, in my opinion, this is not where we want to be with our police force. I think that's just my opinion. And I think he's 100% right with that quality of life stuff. I mean, those are real, and we do have, crime situations here that do require extensive detective work, and, I'd love the county to step in and help out more with that, but I know I live in a Commonwealth, so.
And we haven't seen an increase with the drug task force this year helping us out. But again, we don't have a dedicated drug detective, so we're actually, when we schedule details, we're taken away from squads.
Right.
So they're not there to answer calls or do that proactive work. They're doing proactive work, but it's, assigned drug work for that period of time.
Is there any way, and I'm sure you've analyzed this before, but you mentioned, filling out reports, things like that. Is there any way we could decrease some way, somehow, the amount of non-critical police or non-critical tasks that they do? That's maybe the wrong term. Or have to do, or have someone else at a lower level, a clerical level, do it for them, or to have them more community time,
All
I guess.
11,500 calls that we take, there's a report written for each one of those calls. I mean, documentation is, our lifeblood. I mean, if, when you go to testify in court, it's not written down, officer, how can you say it happened? So it's imperative that it's they're
So it's hard
testifying to that.
delegate that to somebody.
I think there are some that, I think Penn Township may do that, but I think they have 3 clerks, that sort of transpose reports.
Might that be something to consider? I don't know, it would
Why is he
be,
asking for one?
He's asking a police officer to list frivolous tasks they do. Good luck with that. I don't think they have a lot of free time on their hands to delegate what's important and what's not.
We're not having to make a decision on this tonight.
We don't have to make, no, we don't have to
No.
decision.
I'm just
No.
asking consideration to
No,
hire 2.
I'd like to see
in
what
2022.
all the proposals are going to cost us, because ultimately we have to pay. So I think.
And ultimately, we've been
we
in-
know what
yeah.
it's all going to cost us.
We've been in a position with staffing that I can't give you an honest answer or an estimate what overtime would cost if we get down to that level. I don't want to get down to that level. So, we've been pretty fortunate, but, like I said, at the beginning of 22, staffing was at 5. Those numbers I gave out as far as vacation time and holiday time and training time, that didn't apply because minimum manning is 3, we had 5. So you take that away, you're at 4, you're still above minimum manning right off the bat. So if somebody calls in sick, you're down to minimum manning.
During the day, this is just a question because I don't understand. During the day, when you and Lieutenant Bunny are here, do you still have the same number of policemen on that shift?
On the street, yes.
Oh, because they're on the street? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Unless, like I said, unless they're training. And throughout the year, it depends. I mean, we're very proactive in trying to get officers to training. I believe in training and
Yeah,
improving the
I think
quality.
you're very good at
So training, vacations,
Yes.
the holiday time, that all takes away from that total number of 5. But 3 is the minimum that you'll ever see on the street here in Hanover.
All right. Any other questions for the chief? You presented a good picture.
no, thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
AJ's coming in with the big
AJ's
cost
next.
reduction, so we're okay.
Coming to the hot seat.
Sure. It's time to hold out my hat, too. I certainly don't enjoy this. I always like to do the most I can with what we have, but I certainly see a backward trend, and the sliding is real in our department. So as we prepared the budget for the current year we're in, it was decided to not fill 2 positions that were vacated by retirements. So at that time, I presented a memo of some of the things that we could probably expect to see, how the Department was finally becoming proactive after identifying efficiencies that we could make, and we started to add tasks to what Public Works did and become pretty much proactive. My memos I give you always start kind of like this big, and I try to shrink them down as much as I can to kind of get you to where the rubber meets the road, really. So some of the things that have resulted here with the reduction of 2 staff, obviously the big one that everyone always wants to know about in the beginning is overtime. This is just overtime to maintain and do what we do at the recycling yard. This is very little overtime to say we didn't finish our task, we're going to stay on and do those. It's not going to result in a dangerous situation if we don't get things mowed in time or those kind of things.
Snow and so forth, I guess, would
That's
be.
a different story, sure.
Yeah.
So, or if someone is paying to rent one of our fields, something like that where we have to stay and get that ready, then that kind of figures in that. So you see there, for my first little bullet point there, under overtime, it's typically 2.7% of our labor budget. As of June 30th, we were running at 5.4 and rising, which equates to about $80,000. Along with that part, public perception and the complaints that come in, it's been difficult with complaints because I like to be able to address those things right away. We just haven't been able to.
What's a typical complaint?
So the biggest complaints have been obviously not keeping up with the grass. The street sweeping is probably the biggest one. Folks get really upset when the street sweeper does not come through their neighborhood on a regular basis. And whether or not you folks can tell right away, I can tell when we have to skip 3 or 4 days, things look rough. And that also contributes to what we are loading into our storm sewers to try and keep that stuff off the road.
Point.
Yeah.
So, which is one of the reasons why we bought the type of street sweeper that we did for this
Is that
round.
working well?
Yes.
Are we
Yep.
happy with that?
Yep, very much so. And then a lot of it is the parks and the playgrounds, not being able to get to the trash collection and those things. And so we have those kind of calls coming in on a regular basis, and we've kind of devolved back to a much slower reactive department. Some of the other things that really come into play with what we've been able to start doing at Public Works is some of the road work. So we talk about paving. Typically at this time of the year, that's when I'm really able to kind of make those deals with Columbia Gas and the other organizations, which now includes Chantel, that are doing their business in town. And then again with Kinsley, to be able to maximize our little bit of a contribution to get a really big return on that money. Usually at this point of the year, we're lining up extra things like that to do to get us a lot of free stuff. We're struggling just to keep up with what we've already told the state that we were going to complete for this year. And it kind of puts it back on us depending on Columbia Gas to do some things. Fortunately, we made some big strides here in the late spring, early summer that we are definitely getting our bang for our buck through them. But again, like I said, it's another thing that hampers our ability to negotiate and is kind of sliding us backwards. I also have there about the street markings. Just with what we have to do yet this year, it's very unlikely street markings will not get finished this year for the kind of crosswalks and the intersections. Obviously, we address any places that are safety concerns first, but it is definitely something that is going to be left unfinished for the year. And then the last one I like to hit on.
Is that a labor problem or is it an equipment problem?
Got a brand new,
Right.
got a brand new
Not
thing that
having-
does that.
Yeah, not having the people. So, and just so you know, the yellow lines that are like downtown, those are the state that paints those, not the borough.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
And
a real nice job they did there, wasn't it?
I complain every year.
It's a super job.
And
Rain
that's
over
kind of what
spring.
you can expect to see when you have an outside contractor come in and do those kind of things.
60
So,
miles an hour.
There was like 6 trucks.
I followed them.
There was like a subcontractor followed by a leading state truck and then like 5 state trucks behind it. I'm not really sure.
I've petitioned to say, please let us know. We will come out. We'll cone for you. We'll follow you.
Oh.
Whatever we have to do. It makes me sick. I'm sure most people don't pay a whole lot of attention to it, but yes, very unhappy with the
Surprised they
job.
stopped going through the intersections, you just don't put the yellow line straight through.
Yeah, right.
AJ, can I work you more to the end of this thing?
Yes,
'Cause
absolutely.
I think we all understand what you do, and.
Yep,
and,
absolutely.
They're
It-
interesting questions, but it's a long night.
Yep.
My particular question is, the labor rates, 5.4%, you're projecting they will increase next year. That you've said early on in your memo, that equates to about 80,000.
That's what it was running at in June of this year.
And I'm sorry, I'm not looking at, what is the number of, say, that cost of that per position that you would add?
I'd say about 60. That's that right?
67.
Yeah.
We're already paying
benefits.
80,000.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so I guess the real question,
Yeah.
60 is less than 80, so one seems to be a relative no-brainer. I think
Yeah.
the more
I think
germane
so.
part of the conversation would be, for 120, are we getting a lot more than the 80? Because you've expounded, doing a great job, by the way, of how things aren't getting done.
Sure.
Well, the 80 won't become zero if we spend 60.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Right. So one of the big things that we talked about when we talked about expanding hours at the recycling center and those kind of things, we were taking guys off shift during the week, so that wasn't overtime. I don't have that available to me without those two people.
Right.
One person might make a little bit of a difference there, but when I can get guys to change shifts to work Saturdays or evenings and things like that, which we were having really good response to, I can't have that without the two. The one will help, but it doesn't, correct, it does not disappear without the two.
All right. And you did mention about some, losing some money for grants for some projects you can't.
So just one of the last big things that I'll hit on here is the grants that we get, if we do not do the work ourselves, we end up paying prevailing wage. So just to give you a real quick example, over at Goods Field,
Do that.
it was a $25,000 grant, not a whole lot. If we would have done it through the county, using an outside firm to come in just to haul the ball field surface over there, that would have sucked up the entire grant. Doing it ourselves, we bought all new fencing, installed new fencing, seating, and new surfacing. So it makes a big difference in the
Yeah, it
bang for
looks
your buck
nice.
for a grant. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Nice job. Thank you. And last but not least, is the fire chief. Come on down. Join us.
How is everyone?
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
You've got the cost reduction.
Yeah.
I wish. So, in the budget for the fire commission this year, I budgeted for a deputy fire chief. And as you know, the commission is struggling right now, which is why we want a third-party evaluation to see where we need to go. With the Sam leaving as our treasurer, I think we have an opportunity now to put in a business-oriented person that could take over those duties as well, which is why I've kind of, and I'm going to suggest to the commission at our next meeting that that's what we look at. It's all kind of relative, because if the study comes back and says, no, you need a deputy chief, you don't need a business manager. Or you need a business manager, you don't need a deputy chief. So it's kind of, we don't know what that study's going to show.
I can't believe those, I'm not a big person for studies, but I can't believe they're going to come back with something that's polarly opposite of what you and the fire commission feels. If they did, that, I would be very concerned.
I don't know. I don't know what their scope will be.
Okay.
So,
All right.
that's yet to be developed. So, the budget increase is significant. All things considered, for each municipality, it's about 115,000 increase.
Does that bring us to parity with the EMS?
That takes care of the EMS, yes. That's assuming the decrease in revenue of about 166,000 from 2021 to what we're projecting in 2022, with call volume decreases and the lack of reimbursement. So in my memo, I mentioned the workload that we have in the office. Some of that workload will be taken care of by a business manager or a deputy chief, doesn't matter. Frees myself up, frees Vanessa up to get more things done as well. She is very backed up right now with all the EMS HR stuff, as I'm sure Amy can attest to, the amount of work that you got to do for HR. So I'm asking your consideration to at least acknowledge the potential of a deputy / or a business manager. There's considerable cost difference, I believe, about $20,000 under what I've budgeted for a deputy, for a business manager. So, and I don't want to belabor all your time with, a bunch of statistics on what I do.
Okay.
So,
All right.
thank you. Any
Further
questions?
questions? Okay, so I'm sure we'll be discussing this again. You can, if we would give everyone what they want, what would that cost us?
I think it was around $400,000, Sam? It was 320.
Yeah, It's
320.
about 320.
It was 320. So,
Is that for all three?
Is that
That's correct.
yes,
Yes.
so about close to $500,000
Half a mil.
in taxes.
So you'd have to see some increase in taxes to find that money.
Yes.
It just doesn't roll down the street.
Or other
Right.
suggestions from
Yeah,
Borough
right,
Council.
right. But just keep that in mind as we discuss this, and we can continue to discuss this. I mean, we don't have to decide today, right? Good, all right.
This is our first draft presentation.
So, I mean, you heard these three gentlemen tonight. If you do have any further questions, I mean, to help us make our decision, please do submit those to Nan. She can pass them on. It's I appreciate that you've held the line for 2 years, and it's challenging, and it's challenging for us as well. So, thank you very much for your presentations. Now we get to the big money, the 2022 budget. That's you, Sam, right?
That's me. Mark, go ahead and get our slide presentation
Are you sad this is
ready.
the last time you get to do this?
What's that?
Are you sad that you don't get to do this again?
At this table. I'm sure there'll be a
Don't
few
cry.
others to do in the future.
We might cry, but you don't have to cry. Please.
First, I wanted to thank each of the gentlemen for speaking tonight. It's a difficult subject matter. Obviously, the budget directive is a means in place to help us settle funds while we really decide how we're going to manage through the future, whether that be talking about tax increases, administering the pieces from forthcoming capital plans that are going to be prepared. There's a lot to do, and there's always the discussion of where is the money to fund that. So tonight, we'll hit on a number of subjects, less time spent on enterprise because we covered that last month, so we'll have a brief introduction there. There are a number of slides. We're going to move through it at a pretty decent pace. Every one of you has a copy of the presentation. Following the meeting, I will issue this out to you electronically as well, and we'll be hosting it on the website this week as well. So obviously, the purpose of us being here is to present a comprehensive draft for next year, so you can make the decisions about what level of public services you would like to provide, and essentially how we pay for those, taxation being the largest chunk of that discussion. We have forthcoming meetings that will be in October and November, and this will provide council with an opportunity to look at the impacts of these budget decisions. So we've thrown out some numbers here. The slide presentation will put that to value within the individuals. We'll scope that out of what that means in 22 as well as what that means for 23 through the following 3 years after that as well. Next slide. So you have two slides here with regards to legal responsibilities. These were the same we really covered at the enterprise budget discussions. We have an obligation to establish a budget, advertise it, and post it for public comments. This is an election year. In January, it can be reevaluated for amendment. And then, obviously, council has discretion to amend the budget through the year as they so desire. The next slide, it deals with our responsibilities about taxation. So we set an ordinance, or if there's no change, now it's frankly a little easier, in relation to establishing the tax that's set for the year. We currently just have a general millage rate of 5.65 mils, but the code does give you a number of opportunities to add or carve out millage for specific purposes. So just a few of those are listed there, but they're not the limit to it. A purpose behind this would oftentimes create correlation to say a tax increase of 0.2 mils is specific to this certain function, so that money will be collected, restricted for that use, and only spent for that use and tracked in that manner. So again, it gives some flexibility with consideration of future changes to tax structure or increases to tie them directly to something you're going to do rather than be just general in nature.
Aren't some of our taxes already that way?
No,
Like,
all of ours are general base.
all right, I thought I remembered, maybe I changed, I thought I remembered in the past they were.
So this is basically a timetable, and you can see we're kind of right in the center there with regards to our presentations. We thank council for being proactive and assisting the borough staff with developing their budget directive. Again, with that happening before the process started, gives us a clear direction for department heads as far as what Borough Council would like to see as held lines. As you can see, we do have our following forthcoming presentations to occur, updates in October, a final recommendation for public inspection approval in November, and then final adoption in December. So just a quick recap on the 2022 directive that you did put into place. For all budget funds, no new positions were to be created as compared with the 21 budget unless council would so approve. No positions that were vacant the entire period beginning January 1st, 2021, so essentially our 2020 carry-in vacancies, which each of the gentlemen presented about tonight, were to be unfilled unless council had approved those. Maintain our non-personal operating budget line items at the 2021 spending levels as appropriate, and then provide a separate capital budget plan to focus on essential vehicle and heavy equipment purchases for 22. So these first two bullets relate to what you had received in advance. You got detailed reports from our KVS system, which is our line-by-line budget. I think nearing 30,000 lines at this point. And then you received kind of that mid-level presentation, which was the group summaries by cost centers. So focusing on personnel, our other operating expenses such as utilities, professional services, and then capital and related debt. Tonight's presentation is the step back even further, so from more of a higher level perspective. So certainly you've got those documents. We encourage you to continue to review all those and reach back to us with questions, concerns you would like us to address. But certainly tonight we're going to be stepping back to look at the bigger picture and then focus on the few cost drivers which are significant to the borough, as they are with really every municipality. Initial questions, we request that they come back to the borough manager by October 4th. That will facilitate enough time to review and analyze and report back to council at the October workshops, and obviously as it goes into November for finalizing this year's budget. So let's take a look at the big picture. So when you take the borough as a whole, which again is more informational as it is based on the fact we do so many things, our 2021 budget was set at $37.5 million for expenditures. That broke into just under $27 million for operating and just under $11 million for capital and debt. Our 2022 proposed budget is just slightly higher than that at $37.7 million based on the manager proposed budget, which implements council's budget directive. Operating expenses have reduced by $649,000 in the budget. They are budgeted at $26.2 million. The biggest chunk there is our reduction in pension, and we'll get to that later in slides, but that was a very substantial impact, almost close to $1 million. And we'll have that impact benefit us both in 22 and 23. And from there forward, we hope that any climb in that will be balanced with state aid and we'll still be at a net zero position. Capital-related debt expenses did increase in our budget projection by $778,000, but this extensive slate, which is bulked in the general fund, is really tied to grant activities. We have about $544,000 tied with 100% matching CDBG activities. And we have also a chunk of that relates to 50% STUMP, the STMP grant funding program.
So there's no cash impact to us.
Net on CDBGs, it's limited.
Flow through.
Labor will be very minimal. The bigger pieces of these projects will be contracted services and equipment acquisitions. And then finally, about 400.
Reimbursed the same fiscal period typically?
There can be a delay of cash, but the revenue and expense will always be recognized together in the budget. And then we also have $415,000 that relates to 90% funding from DEP grants for the recycling program. So of 2 vehicles that are looking to be acquired here, again, 90% funded. So a pretty sizable increase in capital, but when you net that out, we're pretty flat capital, actually a little backwards from where we have been in the past couple of years, once you factor out these offsetting grant revenues to cover the bulk of these new additions. And just a comparison point, $38 million even was a proposal from the department heads which relates to the difference of the personnel positions. We have a little bit of information on a couple slides in the future here. So a quick recap in relation to the fund totals. The general fund is proposed at a $209,000 use of reserves. That's a $17.6 million revenue budget and a $17.8 million expense budget. Now, for the purposes of our discussion tonight, general funds includes the general operating fund, the library fund, and the recreation board fund. You're probably used to seeing library and recreation split. We do those for internal management purposes so we can track funds between them and their activity. When we talk about them from a budget perspective and our final audits, they get grouped together. So for tonight, that will be grouped together. And highway liquid fuels is our other governmental fund. And again, the activity differences from there are exceptionally minimal from the previous year, which we'll briefly touch on later. Enterprise funds are grouped there together. We presented those earlier. Changes are exceptionally minimal. We have a single slide to cover a couple pieces there. So in relation to that, our enterprise funds have a sizable deficit, essentially a use of existing reserves. And this is planned. And the biggest piece is in our water fund, spending down the reserves that we've accumulated over the last several years as this pending rate case is moving forward. And those are accounted for in our rate case and give us a better basis to show we are putting direct investment into our system.
The pipes.
Next slide. A quick summary in relation to the differences between the department head presentation proposals and the management proposals, which institute the budget directive. The amounts are in front of you do include an estimate of the employer pension cost on a gross level. Again, right now, that's a pure match to state aid. In the last 2 years, it was not. So it is part of the cost to consider when you look at the positions. Public Works has 2 equipment operators in their proposal that is not included in the manager budget directive implemented proposal. That estimate is about $155,000 for those 2 positions. In the police, there's 1 patrol officer. I know that Chief had presented to you that there were 2 individuals. One of those individuals did resign this year, so they were already in the budget, so they didn't meet that budget directive. Now, of course, that would be brought to council for approval, but there's only 1 position that was excised based on the directive. That was the one that wasn't filled last year.
That math would still be correct. Right.
And so that's $108,000. And then finally, the fire, based on the original presentation by Chief Clauser for a deputy fire chief position, funded 50% through the Fire Commission. That 50% cost is just over $62,000 with benefits. So grand total, just under $325,000 of difference between the department head proposal and the manager proposal.
They're not necessarily budget cuts, though. This is just the delta between one budget and the 3 different, the 3 added together.
That's correct. The other portions of the budget directive were administered by the department heads before they came to manager's approval. So they held that line, and as we mentioned, operating expenses have declined. So that's where we want to see our budget.
But we don't want to pat ourselves too much in the back because that's almost all pension, right?
A large chunk of it is pension.
Right.
So in relation to general funds, just a quick 2021 assessment. So we had budgeted $16.7 million. We're projecting to come in at $17.4. So that's a positive $700,000 delta. 2 chunks of that really make up the difference. Number 1, we had growth in our real estate taxes that have continued. And with regards to business privilege taxes, we assessed a budget with a 25% reduction for COVID impacts. The end result for us is going to be only about a 5% net reduction from business privilege. Again, we did see service income revenues and related taxes decline, but this just relates to continued York Adams Tax Bureau improvement in our collections since we outsourced that function in 2015. So they've helped to offset that burden that we had based on COVID as we continue to increase those that should be filing, and they've obviously done a great job with that. The second piece in relation to permit growth. There's a slight growth because of Columbia Gas and CenturyLink, or Chantel, being very active in our area still. The other piece is Eric did present and brought forward to council, who approved an increase and change to our building permit structure. And we also now collect our third-party fees directly and then pay out our third-party inspectors. So the revenue expense are washes, but they do inflate each side of the equation. But it is the more appropriate way to handle it rather than getting checks in cash, holding them, and just passing them off to someone else. Because in the end, those do need to be performed. If they were performed by the borough, we would have those embedded costs in our payroll.
Well, we used to have to drive checks to other places to get to the guy. It was ridiculous.
In relation to expenses, overall, we budgeted $17.1 million and projected at $16.9 million. So about a $200,000 positive expectation with our expenditures. The biggest chunk of that, about $166,000, relates to health insurance premium refunds that we received in 2021 relating to the premium costs in 2020. So when we put together the budget, the health participant information is usually at least 3 months behind with regards to claims data. So we were utilizing that estimated data at the time to project what our surplus was going to be. We had an exceptional fourth quarter with performance where that number drastically rose. And so that unspent amount of premiums from the last year becomes a surplus to us in the current year. As of right now, we have an estimate for this next year that is in the budget, and we'll have another month essentially to monitor to see if that drastically changes, and we'll amend that if necessary. So where does that take us to at the end here with the 2021? Our impact to reserves, we budgeted to use reserves of $460,000, and we're projecting to add $523,000 to reserves. That'll bring us to just over $10.3 million in general fund reserves. That's about
We had a
just
delta
under
of
$1
$1
million.
million?
We have a delta of about $1 million, which is right above you there. The tax piece, the building permit change, and then ultimately the slight expense reductions. We highlight those bigger parts because, again, with taxes, we do conservatively budget, but we index every year. So that's why you'll see this year the budgeted use of reserves is about half of what we projected last year with the budget, because we continue to index as history proves to us. With expenses, we still have a level of conservatism, but it gets tightened as we go. So that differential really relates to things that we just can't anticipate. We wouldn't have expected that we budgeted $200,000 of health insurance surplus, ended up being $630,000, $400,000 within the fourth quarter alone. We had no idea that was going to happen. Very unexpected, so it's not going to happen likely again. So again, not things that are more concerns with the system, but rather just unique issues we had to deal with, plus planning for what COVID could mean versus
Right,
what
and
it
COVID
did.
went through at the same time, which you would have anticipated your insurance expenses to be higher conceivably because of COVID, and in fact, you'd have been wrong.
Yeah. My greatest concern with that was once things started to get better, folks were going to start driving to their doctors, the hospitals. They were going to start to seek more care. And our trends have been right about where the actuaries expect us to be. So things have been going well there.
Surprising.
And again, I spoke with a lot of different municipalities last year through the process. And a lot of them were slicing a lot of revenue funds. They were cutting taxes. They were cutting earned income taxes as well as real estate taxes. We held the line knowing that, we had expected stability, and it hung.
When you say they were cutting the anticipated revenue, not the rates.
Not the rates, no.
Right.
So in relation to our 2022 proposal, in general funds, $17.6 million proposed in revenue, just a slight increase from the previous year, primarily related to the two items we just discussed, indexing upward for the permit changes, which put a large chunk of the third-party revenues into our side, and correspondingly are in the expenses as a wash.
And the Cherry Tree 4, you said 322, was that all Cherry Tree 4?
322.
On the prior page?
No, that real estate taxes, the Cherry Tree developments, the additions to that probably added about $35,000 this year. I mean, overall, I'm not sure exactly what that
When
figure is.
we did it, the
but it's-
anticipation was, it was 500 and something thousand, but I don't remember if that was for each, or we got half that, but, okay.
So most categories are held flat. We do have, as I mentioned, a significant increase in grant activity for this next year with our CDBG, with the DEP recycling grants, as well as the strategic management planning grants we have proposed.
Not that I'm happy that people go out and look for those grants. That's a good thing.
It's going to be a very active year for those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, one thing I just want to preface with this is no piece of ARPA, the Rescue Act funds. This doesn't come into this equation at all. That's a separate plan, separate operating ins and outs, just so everyone's clear on that. In relation to proposed operating expenses, $15.2 million is proposed. In relation to, that as a reduction from our previous budget of $100,000, it's a balance of our contractual wage increases, which average between 2.5% to 3%, and our health insurance, which we have an estimation of 8% premium increase. We should get a final here, actually, hopefully by the end of this month. And that's offset by that significant pension reduction we had based on the investment performance from our last study. We have a proposal as part of the general fund of $867,000 to support the library operations.
That's before debt service.
What's that?
That's before or after debt service?
That includes what we would provide for debt service.
Okay, thank you.
That is a $125,000 reduction from last year's proposed budget. And the fair share is a slight decline, I think about $10,000. And then finally, it still does include our continued funding for various local projects and group support, including Main Street Hanover at $40,000. The community, I apologize, it says community development, but the Hanover Economic Development Corporation at $30,000, and then the downtown project spending allotment at $50,000.
Sam, could you repeat for me what the total was to the library for this budget?
Overall, $125,000 is reduced in what the general fund has to subsidize for those operations. And I will say with that, debt service is level, so it wasn't a decrease in debt, it was a decrease in other expenses.
That's good.
Does that 866 include the 121, or is the 121 in addition?
121 is in that 866.
Can you give me an idea of what expenses that might refer to? Are books cheaper? Like I don't know.
We have personnel reductions. Shana identified full-time positions that will be more part-time in nature. We did have an individual that had been with the library for a long time retire, so there's the price differential in that as well. We also have the pension benefit, which we discussed, that also plays into that. And then overall, there were some other reductions in expense category that were held to where they were at the 2021 level.
And that includes the redux from Penn Township in their fair share?
The fair share in the 2022 budget is equal to the 2021. We're still awaiting understanding as far as why that was cut, because it was in both of our budgets at the $85,000. So maybe we have a $30,000 discrepancy, but it's... There could be next year. Okay. But we're still addressed. Is it a draft budget? We still are awaiting information to better understand.
If we're within 30 grand on 37 million, we're doing pretty good, right?
So next, proposed capital-related debt expenses of $2.7 million. This is a good bit up from last year, but again, it's beating a dead horse, but it's these grant programs. $384,000 directly related to CPG, $160,000 for our STMP proposals, and then finally $415,000 for the DEP. So those are 50%, 90%, 100% grant-funded activities. When you factor those out, as I mentioned, we're looking at reduced capital spending than in the previous year. There are some new debt amounts that are limited to several small lease issuances, and AJ is going to discuss those a little bit later here this evening. But overall, our debt service is remaining level between the fund. So that puts us at a proposed budget deficit with the manager proposed budget at $209,000 use of reserves, which would bring us into an estimated $10.1 million at the end of 2022. As a way of comparison, the fund balance policy that we have in place that Council enacted several years ago requires that we consider to have 25% of expenditures available at all times. That amount is $4.5 million, so we're well above that at this juncture, to the tune of about 57% of our 22 expenses rather than 25%. So again, that gives us available cushion as we start to discuss about how to fund the longer-term capital project pieces, which we know are on the table with the library, with the police department, with the public works.
Those additional, we got 25%, so that helps when we try to negotiate the kind of stuff, because it shows health and it shows like we got our stuff together. So
yeah, when we go before Moody's or S&P, previously when we did that, they love to see this because again, they rely on reserves as ability to support their ratings, that we have sound financial management,
yep,
and that we have the ability to weigh the storm if there should be a catastrophe. With the refuse operation, it doesn't put us in a position where a lot of other boroughs and townships are at the start of the year. 3 months, 25% is pretty much the norm for everyone because you have those lean January, February, March until the real estate tax roll in. With the refuse balanced every quarter, that helps us from the cash flow perspective, whereas this 25% may be necessary to survive.
I actually read like 20% of the municipalities, I don't remember if it was in the state, actually, because of what you said, that go out for revenue anticipation loans.
Yep, they'll take trans and trans,
Yeah.
trans and rans to be able to do that. And there is an interest cost to that, and
Oh, yeah.
it's not always tied to market. It's
Right,
just
but
tied to.
You have to think too, we're carrying an extra $5 million or whatever it is, and we're getting, 60 basis points on it? Something like that.
Yeah,
So.
which
it's
is
not-
good we're getting because everyone else is getting 15, so.
Thanks, Sam.
Just again, as comparison, the 2021 budget was proposed with 461,000 deficit of use of reserves. So that's cut by more than half in what is in front of you. So as part of our budget and the summary schedules you get 2 projected years. So it doesn't give you too much data to comprehend, but gives you a little forward look. When you only look at 1 year, things could look rosy and in particular that no concern could be arose. And as you saw with 2023, it's pretty static to 2022. But what you'll start to see in 2024 and out years is the compounding of the contractual pieces where revenue is flat and expenses, they rise. We do have a lot of expenses that are held flat, but professional service costs, we expect an inflation rate. And obviously our contractual pieces and health insurance costs are based on those trend rates which we apply. So when we take those outward with virtually flat revenues and personnel growth at 2.5% to 3% based on contracts and a 6% healthcare expectation, in the manager proposed budget, it would result at 2026 fund balance reserves of $6.8 million. Essentially, our budgets from 23 to 26 using $3.3 million of what we have. Now, that does not include any capital investment into any of the long-term pieces which we've been talking about are coming for discussion in the future. Now, in relation to that, that still gives a cushion at the end of 2026 against our 25% minimum. That would be $4.6 million, so it gives you 2.2, but obviously that's about a year and a half before that would disappear in itself. Under the department head proposal, when you amortize out those $325,000 in positions, the impact of those is $1.7 million over that time in addition, which brings that projection down to $5.1 million in reserves left at the end of 2026, which is just about near that 25% point. So again, it shows the frailty of a small decision of a position, but then it also harpers back to the fact of governments really can't manage off of flat revenues either. So this is a delicate balance of discussion and one that council will continue to consider.
Labor and benefits, yeah, no business could, right?
Really quickly, on the Highway Liquid Fuels Fund, a pretty static budget here. We are projecting a little better revenue as we start to see improvement in the gasoline tax collections. And the operating expenses, it's within $3,000 less of last year's budget. Capital expenses are just slightly higher. There is a proposal for acquiring a $50,000, and that's an estimate, for a thermoplastic line painter and the related hauling trailer. This will provide a more thicker penetration of the line painting and be more wear resistant, which is a key for the amount of traffic, especially when we get in our downtown section areas. And $85,500 projected for our budgeting of road program, which is flat from our 21 budget. This should still create surpluses, which gives AJ the flexibility to work with Columbia Gas, work with Shentel, to be able to possibly put an additional plan or two in place with PennDOT for approval for use of those funds. So it still puts us in a good position that there's reserves for use in case an opportunity arises for us to get that value partnership and maximize our dollar investment. In 23 and 24, we expect the return to more historic state funding levels, which should give us more funds to be able to keep increasing that road program expense budget.
And that liquid fuels, 400 grand or whatever it is, we can pave anything we want. It's not for state roads, it's for anything that is counted in the
It's not
roads
specific for state
mileage.
roads, but it's specific to what isn't counted in that mileage, which again,
Right,
since we
which-
have a pretty large alley network, does mean there's a lot we can't.
Right, you can't use it on not unnamed alleys, I think it is.
Any alley.
Any
You have
alley.
to have a certain amount of road frontage.
Yeah.
So most of our local roads qualify.
Right, and I think we don't have a shortage of roads to pave.
Correct.
Just a very quick update in the enterprise funds. We gave the presentation in August in relation to those. Really, our changes are one in the water fund of note. We did have a recommendation from the filtration plant to move up our proposed 2024 replacement and consolidation of SCADA servers at the filter plant. When the filter plant was built, they put a lot of these in, and they're very complex. In looking at that, that adds more licenses, more warranties, more servicing. So we're working with a new provider on a plan for a much smaller scale server setup that our IT can assist with managing internally, which is going to greatly save costs. Plus, we've also encountered some concerns with their alarm maintenance with these systems, so the decision was made to recommend to move that up. We did have an increase in the estimate based on what we're dealing with chip shortages and costs from 85 to 95,000. But again, this was in the original presented budget, just shifting up a couple years here in the capital plan.
I would like to see an analysis done on our IT expense, what we spend in capital, if anything. I mean, we may just expense it all. What we have in recurring expenses and what we have in labor, to look at that, because I know our labor's a third party. And should we be considering doing our own work? I know that's a big pill to swallow, but I don't know, I never see what we used to call a nature line item, which would capture all the IT expenses across all the business units.
Well, we have that behind the scenes that we manage.
I'm sure we do, it's in those state
I'm trying to remember
codes.
off the top of my head what the labor amount was, but I think it's about $40,000 to $50,000 of labor. So to get a person to do that.
You're not going to get them for under
No.
100.
And actually, when we did look at what an outsource would look like for that, that pretty much doubled as well in consideration. Plus, we weren't going to move to a ticket system, which means when we need Dave at 2 a.m. in the morning, he's there at 2:05 in the morning. Yeah. We did evaluate that in 2017, and it just did not seem feasible at the time. However, Dave is a sole individual supporting the borough, so that is always in our consideration as we move forward to ensure we have redundancy in case something happens to good Dave. And we like Dave.
Yeah, I understand that, and I know that's been a long-term thing, but it is a risk, and most other people are moving, not putting in hardware in their facilities. They're going with cloud-type servers. And with the big Shintel investment we're getting, we will then have, I guess, triple redundancy for our internet service, 2 fiber and 1 copper supplier.
Our server exposure is pretty limited. Cloud-based has been evaluated as we go forward, especially from a backup and management provision. But we do have relatively limited server operation within our footprint. But that is something we do continuously look at, especially when financial accounting software in the future would be cloud-based, which they virtually all move to that platform.
Right.
That does open up the office for that discussion. But I would think you're always still going to have one, and right now we just have 2. So we're not too far from getting to that point. So we will have revisions that are anticipated as you kind of roll out in October, November, especially when you get into water fund, because there is such an aggressive slate of work that happens as you attempt to close out a year before the paving season is over. So that will be monitored and it'll be communicated to you. We're hopeful that what essentially happens is a net zero, so it's a shift between 21 and 22, but the end product still gets us to the same result. So I'll move through these parts a little quicker because we don't want to belabor these, but there are the big cost drivers that any municipality has, and that's what are our revenue trends and how we use those revenues to pay expenses, and what are those key expenses. And those focus on salaries and wages, health insurance, and pension. So on the next slide, just a quick on revenue trends. Most revenues are on flat trends. They have been for some time and continue to plan to be without council action. We do have some differences. We do have growth in real estate, earned income tax, and our curbside refuse charges as we continue to have growth. Cherry Tree 4 continues to grow, and it'll hit the point where it's completed. Cherry Tree 5 is just waiting in the wing. We also have some local development that's adding additional apartment units and planning. So there is some level of growth that we are projecting into the budget as it rolls out. So we don't just have it purely flat.
That's important because not too long ago it was going down.
Yes.
The assessed values.
Yes.
So
And we
we had
finally
a
hit
whole
that
bunch of
1 billion mark, and we've continued to climb up from
we
there.
had people continually going for reverse assessment appeals to bring them down. That seems to have stopped too.
It is slowed, yes. Business privilege taxes, we're proposing that those are returning to their more historic levels. And again, they will continue to improve as York Adams is administering them for us and has the data to be able to match and better manage that system. And then finally, we do have water rate increases that are conservatively budgeted for outside our jurisdictions for PUC, and pending those water case results, which we expect in the spring. And of course, further consideration will be given by the borough for in-borough rates as we move into that point as well, when those become a little better known for what that impact will be outside the borough. So just a quick chart on our personnel. I guess the biggest takeaway from here is we're getting smaller. We were at 150 positions of full-time nature back in, I think, 2017. 2022 is proposed at 144. In relation to that, some of the reduction is, as you can see, if you get towards the bottom there, is with library, moving from 10 full-time in the 21 budget down to 7 full-time in 2022, with some of those positions shifting to a part-time basis. And again, Shana is our new director.
Right.
She's going to be working through the process to understand personnel and how that relates to the functions that they're going to be working with. As the study group moves forward, she'll be involved with that. So there may be changes and discussions to happen at later dates about that, but she feels comfortable with where the proposal is coming in at this juncture.
So this is full-time and full-time equivalents?
Now, this is merely full-time in the chart. The part-timers are noted off to your bottom left. We have 12
Got it,
part-time positions across the entire borough. 9 of those are in the library, so that's our primary focus. 49 seasonal part-time positions for just the summer laborers and swing laborers, which includes 40 of them in the recreation program. And then finally, fire is based on our borough employees and excludes the EMS individuals that are employed by the commission themselves. Next slide. Quickly on salaries and wages, 2021 projections are at just under 10.4 million, and 2022 is just under 10.5 million. And that's a 0.93% increase. The increase over the last 5 years has been 13.5%, or about $1.2 million. That's roughly about 2.7% a year. So again, right on target with contractual increases of 2.5 to 3. When you go back to those earlier years, we did have some significant raise increases of 3 to 4.5% based on a pay freeze that occurred back in, I think, 14. Thank you. Full-time budget positions that I mentioned have declined by 6 roles from 17 to 22. And just a quick status on our 5 union contracts. ASME White, our office group, is in negotiation. The others are under contract. 2 of them are set for negotiation next year, which are ASME Blue and fire drivers. USW, our water contract, would be 23. And then police, the arbitration award was completed here in this year. The next negotiation would be 24. In relation to health insurance, our current coverage is 404 covered members, 135 active employees, 10 retirees that are under the age of 65, and 259 spouses and dependents. As you're aware, we segregated our post-65 retirees in a separate plan a couple years back.
We pay their premium, but they reimburse us 100%, the retirees?
Not all of them. Police are the ones that do have a level of borough-paid health insurance for 5 years. But all other employees that have retired reimburse 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Insurance through Benecon is a hybrid self-funding nature. So we don't do our self-funding by ourselves. We use a co-op. The benefits of doing that are using larger bases of groups to get better benefits of rates And obviously, the biggest thing with Benetcon is the premium return we get when we don't perform exactly as our actuaries predict, which has been beneficial for us so far.
But, so our costs are netted back to us, to our actual experience.
Yes, less a small share of that they keep to fund the groups that are over.
Right.
2021 projections, health insurance is going to come in at 3.4 million. The 2022 proposals are 4.2 million. Now, you see there's a pretty big differential there. It's in the 20% range. The biggest key there is the very substantial premium return we got in 2020. If you take that out of the equation, the difference is 8%, which is what we're
So the
projecting for
2021
our health.
number's understated by that amount we got back.
2021 includes a reduction of that return.
So that should have, what, 500 or 400,000 more?
Yes.
Okay.
So the differential between, once you factor that out, the differential between the two is 8%, which is our trend rate at this point.
Right.
We're hopeful that it comes in a little less when we hear about it at the end of this month. but
Doesn't ever seem to, though.
Everything goes up 8% a year, doesn't it?
Everything
Yeah,
is
my
up.
pay goes.
Except for my
yeah.
salary.
Yeah.
You only get 8%?
No, I wish.
Next slide, in relation to pensions.
Days are gone.
So you'll see,
Unless you change jobs.
we'll see this is a great benefit to us. This is a heart monitor. We'd have some problems as we've hit zero. So in relation to our pensions, as I mentioned with our
Stick
2021.
to finance, man.
Sorry, I'm channeling my inner Norm Macdonald, all right? I gotta be as dry as humanly possible.
Oh, it worked out for him.
Now I'll give you the symbol. Good work, sir. So in relation to our pension trends, as you'll see, they really bottom off this year, and that's relation to the actuarial study. So if you look, police is kind of back to where we were in 2018.
What does our portfolio look like in pension investments? Just
Very
down,
diversified.
Something like that.
Very
between
diversified.
equity
Those
and
pension costs are heavy.
fixed.
It runs about 75-25. Anywhere from 65 to 75 is kind of that sweet spot. They're a little heavy in equities because the market is so rich right now.
So it grew.
But we have a very, very detailed investment policy that they have to administer to, which says, here's where we'd like you to be, but here's the exact range, which is you have to stay
So
within.
then once a year, they just true it back up to the right
They
ratio?
true it all through the year, based on hiring and firing investment managers, shifting of portfolio balances. We meet quarterly here. We open up to our union groups where we go through holdings analysis plans. It is very well actively managed, and our results truly do show that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, last year was tremendous.
Yeah, we didn't stop.
So again, as you can see, we're definitely seeing the benefit of those pension.
Well, because, that was for so many years that had been the story with the pension plans in the school districts in the state that, the pension, the drop in equities in 2009, it sort of sounded like everybody took all their cash out in 2009, put it in a mayonnaise jar, buried it in the backyard, and hasn't done anything since, which
Our
obviously
management
isn't
of
the
the
case.
pensions is just like you would manage your own pensions. If you look at it every day, it'll kill you. So just
Right.
know you're in a long haul, and if you're down, you're going to get back up. So in relation to look at those trend costs, 21 projections, our pension mandated cost at 1.47 million, and we're projecting state aid at 932,000. I do hope that the number comes in better than this. We did keep this conservative because last year was the first year in a decade that their state per value decreased. So we're projecting flat off of that decrease for this year, so I'm hopeful that'll be closer to $1 million, so that'll be even better. But that creates a net pension cost of $537,000 or 5.2% of payroll. For 2022, our mandated pension costs, which you authorized earlier here in consent, are $548,000. So you can see a drastic reduction. And we're projecting state aid to match that amount, which brings net pension cost to zero, and obviously 0% of payroll. Based on that very favorable investment performance. Now, this will
5% 's not
keep in
bad
place for 22 and 23. And then at that point, the new valuation would determine what becomes of this in 24. Now, depending on the timing, we might be able to squeeze another year out of 24 at this level, which would be great. But then we would expect any increases in those pension costs to be met with increases in the state aid, because as you can see here, we can roughly expect about $1 million in state aid. So we've got a cushion between 548,000 pension up to $1 million before we'll start seeing any net out of pocket. So next slide, just real quickly here.
And this
the
is a
old
silver
break the
certificate
dollar.
picture.
Yeah, I know. You know, it was funny when I first put that in here, O'Rourke caught that like immediately.
Yeah, I think,
But just to give you a highlight, everything is very static in revenue with regards to values and percentages as compared to where they were last year. So with that, I'll move us to the next slide, which is where does our money go? Only a slight change. Personnel did decrease by 2%, and that really relates to the pension discussions we had. And then ultimately, that shifted off with an increase in our direct capital outlays, which again, we've kind of hit that horse as much as we can here tonight. I have a couple pie charts here because we love pie charts. They speak without having any narrative. So let's just look at that for 3 seconds. Beautiful. Half of our funding is taxes, which is no surprise to the group. In relation to where does that money go, 2 quick pie charts. We have it broke by department and broke by type. So Department Public Works has the largest level of expenditure use in the general fund of $7.3 million. We'll talk about that in another second here, a couple slides from now. Police is the next piece at $4.1 million, or 23% of our general fund costs. And then from there, it goes to fire, executive admin, finance, and DPE, library, and just general administration, which is really retiree management. So for broken by type, as with any municipality, we are personnel driven. We provide services to the public, and that takes mostly people to do. 57% of our budget for the general fund is personnel, or $10.1 million. That is a reduction from 62%, again tied with the pension reductions we have. In relation to that, direct capital outlays did increase based on the CDBG, STMP, and DEP funding, which will hopefully come ASAP.
does utilities include fuel? PDQ?
Utilities includes fuel, yes. Utilities
Public
include
works and
gas
employees.
and oils, as well as your sewers, storm, and
I'm surprised
water.
it's that, and as well as electric, I'm surprised it's that low. I don't know why.
And some of the investments that the chief is looking into with the vehicles is testing out hybrid, putting hybrid into motion, which we'll see if that
I offered that.
small increase in cost relates to nicer increases in those admin and operating costs.
You can try out Karen's smart card if you want it.
So this next slide gives us a little more breakdown about what percentage of these departmental budgets count against our taxation needs. So the library is 9% of that need. Now, it is worth note that this is a gross figure. So when you factor in the library has a $1.6 million budget and $708,000 is received in revenue to help offset that, it becomes 5% net. In relation to public works, as you saw with the pie chart, obviously the largest chunk of our general fund expenses, 41% of our taxation piece. But that does generate $4.9 million in refuse charges, which bring that down to 13%.
We'd like to find a way that we could increase our revenues for things like the transfer station without raising the rates, like how we could have more sales, you know? Because that would be pretty much free.
And
Free
that
money.
directly falls under the STMP grant we have proposed for that study of a refuse and transfer station. So we will get those answers.
Yeah, I don't know what we need to do, because then from looking back, we used to do a lot more business than we do. And we don't.
Police is at 23%, fire at 17%, and then finally, when you put the executive admin, finance and office, and the planning codes together, that is 10% in total. So there you get a little better impact of what the taxation is driving with regards to our expense budget.
It's an interesting breakdown.
And I'll wrap up this last slide before I turn it over to Nan with just an assessment on what does the average homeowner pay on their taxes. So our average home value is $155,300. At 5.565 mils at the current rate, that equates to $877 in borough tax per year. Per capita tax is $5 per individual resident aged 18 and older, and earned income tax for all working individuals is 0.5% on their W-2 wages. The borough median household income being $52,000. So that equates to about $260 a year that the borough gets from a working average
What is the earned
household.
income total, Mel?
About 1.7 million in total.
Okay, so it's, so it's like 340 million. Yeah.
In relation to, I'm sorry, Scott.
Just the total number, what the total earned income for the borough.
He's taking that 0.5% and going
It's a 0.5%, so it'd be
Oh, okay.
340 million.
Yeah, yes.
So that's up like close to $100 million in the last 12 years.
There's been growth in the community.
Huh?
You know that number?
Yeah, that includes you and me.
Yeah.
So the total average working household of two individuals would pay $1,500 in total taxes at the current millage rate. So that's income taxes, it's per capita, it's real estate.
It's a nice graphic for people to.
Yeah.
sort of
In
see what
relation,
money is.
yes, in relation to real estate taxes as a whole within the borough, it's about $5,400 for that average home, or about 3.5% of the value. Obviously, the school district makes up the biggest piece of that, as it does with every community, because they source their primary education, which is personnel-driven, by real estate tax. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Manager Dunford.
Thank you, Sam.
You only get 3 slides?
I only get 3. We decided to give Sam a break at this point, and also to lead you to start to consider the kinds of questions that you need to set the budget policy going forward. So on this slide, as you'll see, our current taxable real estate value is now assessed within the borough at $1 billion. And every $500,000 of taxation yields approximately $500,000, and every mill, of course, yields $1 million here. So for an average household value, that is the mean value of the homes, at $155,300, the $500,000 would equate to a $78 increase or on a home, on a household, or a mill would be 155. And I believe, Sam, what is the actual, it's like $866, so this takes us to $900 for an average home.
That's correct.
Okay, I got
Say that again, you lost me there.
So the average home, it's assessed at 155.3 here in the borough.
About right, yeah.
And the actual taxation now is 800 and change. If you add $155, you're in the 950 area. I mean, those are rough numbers from my memory.
Yeah, okay.
So that gives you an idea of where we are. The budget directive which you put together, which I based the manager's budget on, we ended up cutting from the department head's request $325,000. So that's 2 public works staff, 1 police officer, and half of a fire staff person, because it's shared with the commission. And so you can see a $500,000 would replace those staff.
But these people aren't here today.
They are not here today. We
Okay.
replaced those budget cuts, I should say,
Right.
more correctly. So the next slide is about the key decisions that you have to make. Right now, the 2022 general fund budget, as shown in what's called the manager's budget, is balanced using $208,000 in reserves. I'm not too worried about that, because as you can see, there's a very big swing in our actual performance, and there's some, although we're tightening every year, there's some conservativeness in the numbers. So first of all, is that acceptable? It is okay to balance your budget with reserves particularly. So that's something to talk about and consider. Does the borough wish to consider increased staffing? And if so, how would you like to pay for it? And then finally, given the trend that if we just pay for the people and our services that we have today, that by 2023, you're going to again start to see the finances go off a cliff, do you want incremental tax increases to keep the trend flat? So you've done quite a bit with your expenses, and held the line and kept the borough out of trouble. But we are suffering with the service cuts, as you've heard tonight. So you're going to have a couple of decisions to make next month. So that was my part. And we will be back to you on October the 20th with additional information, and we'd like you to tell us tonight any questions that you have, and also to email me, especially very soon, because we're going to have Sam here for a few more weeks to do additional calculations.
I think the
We should
presentation
have
has
everything
given us a
together
very
next.
good picture of all aspects and facets of the borough with regards to personnel, all kinds of costs. So I think we have a very good picture on which to base our decision on. So if you have questions, get them to Nan, and we'll discuss it next month.
I would say this, and I've maybe been a jerk about this at times, but this is by far the best, most comprehensive presentation I've ever seen here for this. And I really like how you're looking at it now at the total and then, general fund and other, as opposed to the 16 little tiny funds that we're trying to break into all the minutiae. It's much more, much easier to understand and keep on the big picture. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Scott. You've not been a jerk about it, don't worry. I don't mind the questions, never do.
It's yeah, if you don't get this, there's a problem. So this is great.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, department heads, and thanks, Nan. Thank you very much. We have our work laid out for us there, and so we will take care of that next month. Next thing, moving on, new requirements for employees and residents with COVID.
Do you want capital plan?
Oh, I apologize.
He's got another deck of
Capital
slides.
plan. So I sent the capital plan out to you. I just wanted to
Oh, yeah. Oh,
highlight-
I'm sorry. I
And I
forgot
really
that.
highlighted the piece
Sorry.
that was changed, was moving the server change upward in the capital
Okay.
plan. AJ is still evaluating how we're going to roll out CDBG projects, so there could be some change with regards to the timing of those, but the overall scope of those is really set. It's just a question of what can be done in which specific year. So there might be some continued shift to that as we move through this year, but certainly the net impact of that over the grant period is going to be the same. But I just wanted to, again, just
So CapEx is flat.
call to highlight. What's that?
CapEx is flat.
There's only that one change, what I presented in
How do you
August.
define leasing in the CapEx figures? In other words, if we lease something that's, $1 million, and it's a 10-year lease, and it's a capital lease, say, so we buy it at the end for $1. We show $100,000 a year in lease payments. You would consider that CapEx, 100 in each of those years?
Yes, this was a change we made to this budget this year to make that, I guess, relationship a little better. Last year, we had debt expenses within the operating standpoint because they weren't direct capital. But in essence, we have no operating debt. We haven't issued any debt for operational concerns. It's been all capital related. So
Correct.
this year, we segregated that with the capital, so it's capital and related debt. So they come together, so you can see direct capital outlays as well as leased financing costs.
Okay, so they're, in the terms of CapEx, lease payments and capital are the same term?
Yes, but we do break them for you in your presentations.
So when you say that the CapEx is flat, that CapEx, including lease payments, are more or less flat year to year?
With the rolling stock plan, that is the goal. Now, again,
Okay.
you'll have some ebbs and flows based on
I get
some
it,
bigger
yeah.
pieces. And obviously, the longer-term capital plan will play a part in that as well. But we strive to keep that level,
Okay.
and that helps the budget plan.
Okay. Is that it?
That's all I had for that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Again, we have a good financial picture. Now, COVID requirements.
COVID, so
Yes.
Borough Council agreed way back when, March 2020, I think it was, that the borough manager would be responsible for COVID actions such as requirements for wearing masks and posting the building requiring the public to wear masks. That's been assigned, and obviously everywhere the use of masks and social distancing has declined. However, as everybody knows, COVID is resurging, and in York County, the resurgence is increasing. We are now, and Amy found this today, I've been following it, and it was very high compared to national data and other places, and now in York County, we are at the most critical level, extremely high. So over the past usually I've been watching it, and the increase in cases has been about 50% over each 2-week period, and it is now 32%. So now we were cumulatively in the extremely high category. For example, in July, there were 13 new cases a day. August, the average was 106. We're now at 178. So it is rapid. And we all probably read about, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, and the vaccinated people can still spread COVID. And I'm sure most of you are all up to date on what that all means. The recommendation for us is that in public areas, we all wear masks, whether we are vaccinated or not. Already, the York County Libraries is requiring a proof of vaccination for all employees. We are not bound by that. However, our library is now requiring masks by employees in all public areas, public at its discretion. And if you're involved in a program or a meeting at the library, you must wear a mask. So as an initial step, I'm asking, because of the sensitivity of this, I'm asking first, if you'd like me to continue as the COVID administrator, and if you don't want me to, want to make those decisions as council, as many municipalities do, feel free. However, I would suggest that we will go forward, and unless you say otherwise, we will require employees who are indoors or in vehicles to begin to wear masks as of a date in the near future, so we can get ready. It may be coming that we have to deal with COVID restrictions at the Market House. And maybe, depending on some federal actions that are coming, vaccinations of all employees may be required, but that remains to be seen. So are there any comments on what you would like to see or not see in terms of COVID restrictions, or shall I just carry on? And
I'm not wearing a mask.
I mean, no,
I'd just like to thank you.
Yeah, first off, thank you. Secondly,
What a crap job. You guys stuck
it's
with.
my
Thank
it's
you.
my opinion that we're at a point of liability with this. This isn't about wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, what's real, what's not. The fact of the matter is that, we have to do what we need to do to protect ourselves as a municipality from potential liability of us not keeping the employees safe. So you look everywhere else at every major corporation, their employees are wearing masks, and that's specifically due to liability. So I consider this a liability issue, and whatever we can do to mitigate our role and responsibility in an employee coming back and saying, you didn't do enough to keep me safe, so I'm going to sue you now that I have COVID and I have this and that going on, because that's a real thing. I'm for it.
Would you like a motion of, you continue to be our COVID administrator?
Could we go around and get everybody's opinion on this?
Opinion on whether she should.
I know he's opinion. And
Yeah.
Francie, you feel the same way,
No,
correct?
actually, my question, if you let me finish it, is, are we asking our opinion on whether or not Nan
Yeah.
should continue as our COVID administrator?
If she continues as our COVID administrator, then she makes the plans and satisfies requirements that come down from the government.
And we can
don't
be
have to
free
worry.
of
Because she's in charge of COVID right now. She's saying, should she continue to be the COVID administrator, and she makes the decisions.
As she was before,
Right.
correct?
So basically, if we decide that she is, then we don't have to make any more
Didn't Nan
decisions.
ask for our opinions?
She's asked if she would like us to continue, we would like for her to continue as the
Yeah.
COVID administrator.
Okay.
I'd like to ask Manager Dunford a question. I apologize if I missed this. We have given you this title, COVID Administrator.
However, the COVID restrictions have been lifted, and many other places have imposed them. And this is a politically sensitive matter, and many times when I tell people to put on masks that come in from the public, it's not a pleasant sight, and we have differences of opinion here. So if anybody wants to oppose my continuing as COVID administrator, please, that is something you should tell me, because I was not going to continue given the sensitivity of this nature unless I talk to you first.
I think,
Then somebody
my
has-
recollection is back March of 2020-ish, council through council action, decided to allow you to implement whatever guidelines, policies, and procedures were coming down from the state. As in, that's, if the state did it their way, we were going to follow it. I'll just paraphrase what my understanding was.
I think it was, I think that may have been the final decision.
That was sort of the understanding. I
Okay.
think we
That
all
was
had.
certainly the
I had that
understanding.
understanding.
Right. So I'm not sure why you're to me, I'm thinking you've been doing it, you're doing it.
I'd say it has stopped. We have lifted the restrictions.
Okay.
Because the state has.
Because the state has. We did it as soon as the state did, probably before other municipalities.
But now you're saying other things might be coming out.
Other things
about
might
your
be coming out.
Okay.
So if we have something in place and it's been lifted and it goes back, I think it's still your responsibility. What my thoughts are.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
I didn't know if I missed something.
Can I ask
I think
one
that was my
question?
understanding.
I can see masks, okay, with people coming into the borough and everything. But what I don't understand is, you said mask in cars, okay, and trucks and vehicles. If you're the only person in a vehicle,
Good point.
why is the necessity for the mask when you're the only person
point.
in that vehicle? I mean, it drives me
You're right.
crazy. It drives me crazy.
See one person driving by themselves with the windows open, no mask on?
Yeah. You know, that point drives me crazy. I can understand everything else.
No,
but
you're absolutely
I
right.
just cannot picture this mask, and I'm driving in my car, and there's nobody around me. I can see getting out of the car, going in the supermarket, putting the mask on for the protection.
I definitely misspoke. That is true. That is what we have been doing. If people
What's
are-
this?
You are correct. That is what we have been doing, is when people are together in a vehicle, they
Now,
both.
now that I
both
can
must
see,
wear a
yeah.
mask. So I misspoke.
Huh?
I misspoke on that.
Okay.
So it would be two people in a
state
car.
says.
And we have more than.
We actually have had cases where individuals did not wear masks, were in cars together, and got COVID or were exposed to COVID. So if you're
employees have a mask
together,
on
you
while
wear a
the
mask.
citizens
If
have
it's
to.
one person, you do
Okay.
not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Please have a mask.
So do we
on
just
while
need a
citizens
consensus that
are already
Nan continues to be our COVID administrator? Does anyone object to that?
So why fight it?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. We do have, in our packet, there was some information from community media regarding a proposal to improve the borough meeting room sound system. Questions about that?
Yeah,
Questions? Yes, Darlene?
The community media, and I have it all here, would be a total, if we went with a new sound system, be 15,000. And I don't think we should go in that direction. That's my personal, okay? The other one was $5,058 for the 12 mics would be $3,588, and the digital cabling would be $318, plus the microphone stand for $52, and the installation is $1,100. Now, we do need a sound system in here, but Tim and I were talking and he's very knowledgeable, and he brought up that why don't we get another.
Yeah, I just
opinion.
said, why don't we just get, did we get two prices on this before we do
Right,
anything?
right.
Seems like a
Yeah.
must.
kind
And
of
he
a
knows links, and they're very good. So, Tim, can you take the chair on this? And, I mean, they're very good at what they do.
Could I be recognized for a moment, please? Mr. Worley is here, and he can converse with you about this,
Okay.
and we can certainly get other quotes. So I'd like
Okay.
to direct any
Okay.
technical questions to him, because I am not,
Well,
the
the
technical
thing
person.
that occupied my mind was that if you put these mics in, you have to speak directly into them, because if you move your head left or right, you're not going to be heard. Okay, now we do understand that, correct? I'm talking, okay. And I feel better, I mean, I was talking to Tim really knows also, and he was giving me some more ideas, and I thought, well, what would it hurt to get a second opinion before we jump into spending the money? I mean, the rest of you can give your opinions, I mean.
It doesn't hurt anything, we can put it out to bid to everyone, or we can not. We can't just call up people we like and say, hey, give us price.
That's not what I was saying.
I didn't think it was.
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
it's
but what I
she
was
said.
saying was more of, anytime I spend money at the school, we gotta have at least, if you have two bids and one's 15,000 and one's 5,000,
You know, something's.
it just makes it look a little better when we're bidding stuff.
It's under the bid threshold of 21,000.
Yeah.
Any question, would you like to, an opportunity to explain what you would like,
Clarify,
sir?
the 15,000 wasn't a bid, it's,
Too late.
as I stated, I'm not a professional installing sound reinforcement systems, and I just know another borough that got a quote to do something very similar, and it was just over 13,000. I know another borough was around 30,000 for a larger system, so the 15,000 wasn't a bid, I just said, you have a working system, you need some mics, and that's the cost to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank
And I
you.
What it delivered
kindly
was
ballparked it, right.
two scenarios. So they weren't meant to be comparable to say, here are two things, this one just came in a lot cheaper. They're actually
Right.
two different directions to go.
Right.
Right.
We should probably have
And
a
I really
separate-
appreciate the community media for taking the time and, giving us those prices. But if we go a couple more weeks and check to see if there's any, you said that was not your area of expertise. And that's the only reason why I'd like to include another voice into this. And, so
Okay.
links is very good. Could we,
I'll take care of
could we
that.
do that?
So we're
Yes,
gonna-
Dan?
When you're ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready for me to make a comment? Okay. I'll be happy to do that. However, things are changing with Sam's departure. $5,000 to me with the other purchases that we make in the borough is almost like a supply. So I will be happy to do this. If we put it on a list, it's not going to be next month. I don't have anybody particular to assign this project to at this point. We will get to it, however, and we'll get you we'll get
Okay.
specs, we'll bid it out, we will come back. But this is what we could do with the nonprofit suggestion now. So
Right,
I'll
I
be
know.
happy to put this
I know.
out.
And this
Okay.
was
But, excuse me, you will not get this soon.
I will not, what?
Well, this will not happen soon.
Won't happen
What
next
are we
month. It
talking?
won't happen next
it
No,
month.
what are
happen
we
next
talking in
month.
time? I mean, if
I
we're
don't
just-
know yet.
This is so low.
What do you mean you
Yeah,
don't
I
know
don't know
I mean,
yet?
I think it's working now, isn't it? I mean, I can hear her through these speakers currently.
Yeah.
So you guys
And
all
it
hear.
depends on the volume of your voice, and I think if we find that you can't hear them, you can ask them to speak up. If it's going to go into January or
It will.
February, do
It
you
will.
think that's when it's going to go into?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And why is that?
Because
A budget
We're in the
without a
middle of
finance
a
director.
budget.
It's a
We don't,
minor thing.
mine is, Sam's not going to be here.
Sam's,
Go ahead.
yeah, we are losing a major department head. We have many, many projects in front of us. We are in the middle of a budget process. I do not have administrative support, and it will take me some time to get a proper spec, to put it out for bid, to get the bids in. This takes time, and I can't put that in front of many of the other things I'm being
Okay,
asked to do.
if we're all in favor of spending the 5,000, I just brought this up, trying to save money for the borough.
I actually agree with you, except that I am unable to take on this project right now.
And I don't think that we should be forced to wait that long, because we do need an improvement on, so if you can't get to it, and you don't have the administrative help, then.
Are we hearing okay now?
It's up to each of us to decide, don't we?
Would you take it off?
Take a vote, what?
Why would he take it on this?
What'd you say, Scott?
It's
What? Tim?
Nothing.
No? Okay.
So
It's
is
not a
everybody here?
reasonable request at this time.
Right.
For them to put aside the important work they're doing, the budget that we're trying to figure out, while we're losing our finance director.
So hard.
Well, I didn't know we were
During the
in that.
pandemic, yeah,
Jeanine,
not
I
reasonable.
did not know that we were in that set of circumstances that deep. Okay,
How do
I
you
know.
not know?
Tonight, I have it in front of me.
Well,
So the
let's,
question is, let me put it a different.
why don't we
question.
see if we have a motion to approve that?
Is what we have today, the way it's working tonight, which seems to be better than it has been in the
Yeah.
past. and
Yeah, it
maybe
has
Just
been,
because we're
yeah,
talking about
which
it,
is
I'm more
surprising.
sensitive. Is this good enough for 4 months?
Yes.
Of course.
Say it's good enough.
I'd say it's
If
good
it
enough.
is, then we say we wait 4 months. If it's not,
Okay.
we let Nan execute to her best of ability
I'm fine with
right
that.
away.
That works for me. Does
Can I
that work
make
for
a
everybody?
motion to say,
You make a
I think it's
motion?
good enough for 4 months or 5 months to stay
While we
as we are.
investigate other options.
Right, and I agree with Nan, it is certainly not her A11 priority.
No, she has other priorities.
Is there a second to that motion?
And I
Thank
didn't
you.
mean she didn't.
Aye.
All in favor of that motion, indicate by saying aye.
Scott, seconded by Barb. Aye.
Opposed? Yep. I hear no opposition, so obviously the motion carries. All right, we're good. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Darlene, for bringing it up. We'll get it all worked out. The Finance Department interim plan. Nan, are you going to present that to us or share that with us, or we're just going to read it?
I'm going to tell you that, first of all, really sorry Sam's leaving, really happy for Sam.
You finally got this budget right, too, that's what I came to.
No, it's,
He will be missed.
he will definitely be missed. But as a mentor of mine once said, one of the measures of somebody being really excellent is when they leave, can you pick up the pieces? And I was, of course, when he told me he was leaving, I was like, oh no. But although very happy for him. I've been working with him along with Amy, and I'm learning that, yes, we have confidence that we can continue on with procedurally as well as with many projects. And I'm not asking you to vote on these things, but I'm telling you, these are the pieces and things that we hope to be bringing to you next week. First, to appoint Amy Hill as interim borough treasurer, and then, of course, rescinding Sam as borough treasurer. I've learned as I work with Sam and I work with Amy over the past few days, looking at his work and the procedures, that Amy, actually being here 14 years, knows a lot of the procedures of the borough, and we are finding ways that we can redistribute works. I'm very proud of Amy. She is wonderful in terms of what she knows about the finance department. There are a lot of things that will be hard to do, but we will go forward pretty well. I have confidence in that. I'm also, by next week, hoping that we get to the point of asking you to authorize a short-term contract for accounting services for those things that we don't think we can continue to do internally. And finally, to keep Sam on kind of a retainer for 10 hours a month at $85 an hour. So those are the three actions that I will be asking you to do. I don't have an interim plan now. This is coming pretty fast, but I have confidence that we can continue on. I will say that it will be very difficult. I am actually familiar both in Massachusetts and Pennsylvania with a lot of things and the procedures Sam is sharing. So I believe that although I will be overwhelmed with a lot of things and a lot of incoming business, that we can go on. However, I will, just as I said with the sound system, it will be difficult. Things will slow down. We have had the ability to accomplish an awful lot in 2 years, and that's because Sam does the finance and does an excellent job and has the big picture. So things will slow down for several months.
But it's also procedural that he added. It's not all I've got a spreadsheet, and he's got a spreadsheet, and somebody else has got a spreadsheet, because I remember back, everybody had their own set of numbers type of stuff.
You'll still bring that plan to us for.
I will. There's a fourth action, which I don't know if I need to bring to you, which is to authorize the filling of the finance director position.
Right, I asked about that. Yeah, good.
Well, and there is a new job description that has been developed for it. So the plan is it's in progress, and those are the pieces.
The assistant that we were interviewing for Sam,
Yes.
where are we on that?
We are at the point of hiring, and we also are starting to rejigger what that position looks like in terms of duties to fit this new circumstance.
So we may change the job description, so we're sort of putting it on hold till we fine tune what's going on, is where you're headed.
I don't think we need to. I think we have a candidate that's very good, and we would like to bring that person in so that we're ready to roll.
That'd be good.
And Sam's obviously interviewed them.
Yes.
Since,
Yeah. So you'll bring that to
Myself
us.
and
That'd be on our agenda then
well,
next
you
month,
each,
next week.
okay.
Yes.
I didn't know Amy
Okay,
had any
good.
finance.
What,
background,
the
so-
admin assistant?
No, all
No.
the.
All
no,
those
no.
will be on the
what-
agenda.
The plan, the finance department
next
interim
week.
plan.
Yes.
Okay,
Got it.
got it.
There you go.
I would assume
Question.
you would like to be asking, now that will be accepting his resignation, we know it's coming, you'll be asking for interview candidates to fill the position, correct?
Yes, I will be asking you to authorize us to go forward and fill the position
Next week?
next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, that would be like part 4, that would be like number 4, what's on
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Because I was going to
Yeah.
ask, are we going to
It's on
advertise for
there.
somebody? Yeah.
It's not on the list, but I added it.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay,
Because I was going to do it anyway.
all right.
Well,
It's
you-
it's a
you need
no-brainer, I
somebody.
just want to make sure we're all knowing that.
Yeah, good, good.
Okay, the next item just came up, and it came from some Borough Council members, including Mrs. Funk, that we consider some things about our committees. The committees are established under your ordinance, and it's Chapter 28. Committees are appointed by the President of Council, subject to council approval. That happens at reorganization or right shortly thereafter. The duties of the committee, which are attached, are prescribed by the President of Council and also approved by Borough Council, and those are attached. The committee business must be in the nature of investigation and recommendations to council, so you can't get an action out of it, you have to come back to council. And they are subject to the advertising, quorum requirements, and Sunshine Act requirements. So we've tightened up on a lot of those things, because early on when I came, we did not stick to agendas and those kinds of things, or count quorum, so that's all been tightened up. Also, under Chapter 16 of your ordinance, the borough manager must attend all meetings. If there are complaints against personnel, they go to the manager, but if it's regarding other council members, they're directed to the council president. Council members may not give orders to subordinates of the manager publicly or privately, and I would like to add that that cannot be implied or expressed, because sometimes when you call someone that works for the manager and give your opinion, they feel that they must carry through, so that's also important. Our current practice is that committees meet at advertised bi-monthly meetings if there is business. The manager places matters of business on the committee agenda as they come up. The chair's request to meet is needed when matters come up within the scope of their committee. And when it's not within the scope, they come to Borough Council. And the manager assigns staff and solicitor to committees as needed. So here are my questions that I would like to ask you, given the interest of members. One is, should the committees meet monthly or continue with bi-monthly advertised meetings? How do we decide subjects that come before the committee? And finally, should the committees be staffed? Maybe you could change the ordinance so that the manager would not have to attend all the meetings. You may not need the borough secretary. You could do your own minutes. The solicitor, there's a policy for getting the solicitor to come, and you could follow that. And finally, essentially, do other staff need to go? So those are the things that need to be discussed based on the inquiries that are coming to me that I can't answer, because the committees are evolving to be more independent and to require more solicitor help and manager help. So
Can I
those,
make a suggestion?
to the council,
To
I
the
would
council,
think.
yeah. I would propose that the existing committee heads meet together, and we propose what all of our responsibilities are, so there's no overlap between, or we
That's his job.
we give.
We've already done that, basically.
That's the president's.
Can I finish, or?
Keep going.
Okay. And they also propose how often that we meet, or the committees meet, and come back to council with a working proposal. And Heath, I agree with you, but there may be some fine tuning that needs to come out of it now that we've been doing it for a year or two.
But that shouldn't be segregated just to the committee heads. That's an entire council decision.
Well, what I said, it would be a working group that would come back with a proposal to the council.
We can just do it.
I think it should be a discussion of all of us.
Yeah, it could be a policy and whatever the heck that committee's called. That's
All
right.
right, that's fine. I was thinking
Meeting
more in
every
the.
month and requiring the borough
essence
manager
of
to be at
time.
every meeting every month is crazy. I
Say
mean,
again?
I think that's kind of hard on any borough manager to be at every meeting if
I don't think
committee
she
meets
needs to
every
be at every
month.
meeting
But the ordinance
every
says
time.
that she has
The
to.
ordinance right now says she has to.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. I mean,
Okay.
you've got the directors.
Right.
You know, you have the sewer and water director, you have the planning director and
All
engineering.
right, like Eric pinch hits for you.
They report to her.
And they report, yeah.
I
I don't see a reason.
My suggestion would be that we've all heard it, we pause because we've had a very long
Yeah.
list of things tonight, and we come back next month.
That sounds good.
But I'd also like to, before we leave it, to reiterate what our solicitor started early on in our meeting with, the new provisions of the way meetings are run. So part of my observations, part of where we've gotten kind of bogged down in the muck over the years have been when committees have gone outside their charge, outside their purview. They've taken more on than they should have. Hopefully, the new changes will prevent last-minute additions to agendas and will help focus committees to tasks. My gut tells me that no one really has requested needing a lot more time as far as committee meetings are concerned. So
I don't
my
know.
suggestion right now.
I think Mrs. Funk has requested monthly meetings.
What?
I think you called me and requested monthly meetings of committees, particularly governance.
If there's
Is that
agenda.
Mr.
No,
Lockard?
Chris's father was in the hospital, so I called you.
Oh, that's fine, that's
Yeah,
fine.
and I said, what we're finding is that we have policies that come up every month. We're constantly going over, okay? There's some that we wish to review again. And so, Chris, you can explain this too.
Her concern was, that she expressed to me, was that she wanted to review a policy, and didn't want to, if we have a policy to review and we don't want to wait 2 months,
Right.
and I said, in this case, if that's what you want to do, we can, I mean, if there's business to be done, I don't want to have them every month just for the sake of having a meeting. I mean, we're already here enough, but, you know, if there in fact is something, and then the other thing that I thought too that would be good would be if we make sure that, you know, just in case, so that the chairs of any committee, if they know of anything, since everything's got to be put on the agenda, that if, you know, just a brief communication to the chairs prior to the allotted time that's needed to advertise for the agenda and all that sort of thing, that would get, that way if there would be anything that anybody knows of that should be on the agenda, that way we're not in violation of sunshine.
Well, conceptually then, who owns the agenda of a committee meeting?
Right now, the manager does.
The
My
committee chair
opinion.
has input. The committee chair has input too, don't they?
Yeah, mostly. I take it from, I either know that we have an internal need, or I get it from the chair, as in this case with
We do the same thing with public safety. I send you and Dory an email, can we add this or whatever, as, you know, as necessary a couple times a year.
Well, we have public safety coming up, and there's a request to discuss the noise ordinance, which seems appropriate. There's a request, you made a request to Dory to invite the solicitor. We'll work that out, but it does get expensive because people take time off after they come to your committees, and the solicitor is expensive. So maybe it's better if you don't need staff at these committees, unless you really do, like water and sewer, you definitely will.
Well, in the case with public safety, we're going to have the solicitor from a other PA
Organization.
borough that is going to exchange their best practices with us on this noise management thing, and they requested.
They
that-
won't speak unless our solicitor's there. It's
Okay.
the rights of the lawyers.
So we're having, I haven't looked
You know how
into
these
that
lawyers,
because I've
they all
been
work, they're in a
fairly
union.
busy.
How about if those questions you posed prior to our limited discussion, could you send those to us so we have those to think about for the next month?
Yes, it sounds
That'd be
like
great,
some
as
of
Bill
the
suggested.
questions have been answered. It doesn't sound like, although I understood that there was an interest in meeting monthly, it sounds like there's not an interest in meeting monthly.
I sort of feel like I am, only for the sake of, I just realizing how much we're not going to be able to speak to an agenda and have that fluid, we can kind of take on a little bit more than's written. I think it's going to end up being, by default, we are going to start meeting monthly again, because you're going to have to, you can only put so much, we can't sit here for 4 hours every single time, so it's going to have to be spread out, because you're going to have to put so much on agendas.
And we can
because
cancel them if
have
we don't
to.
need them,
And
right?
you can cancel if you don't need it, but I really think the result, based off the new sunshine requirements, I think it's going to kick monthly meetings.
Well, you know, we have 3 more months of this year to sort of,
work it out.
the new sunshine provisions are in effect. We can use it
Yeah.
as a gauge.
A trial.
Yeah, right.
Again, we can be much more efficient and effective in our government by getting to the important matters at hand and not sitting here and making comments about everything that's said.
You gotta stay
I do
focused.
think we
You
should
gotta stay
change our
focused.
ordinance to allow the manager to delegate.
Staff.
To the director, to her direct board directors, absolutely.
That doesn't make sense for her to be at everything,
No.
unless she feels she needs to.
That would be her
Right,
choice.
she's always a, what do they call that? There's a
Yeah.
great Latin term for that.
Well, get those
Buck
questions
stops
out
here.
to us. and we'll
Okay.
think about it.
Buck
Okay,
stops
let's
here.
move on to the next one.
No, that's not
Um,
it, Mr. Truman.
Moving on to the next one, we have a borough council vacancy. We have to advertise for that and then schedule. You're going to tell us what we have to do, aren't you? I can tell you standing up, you're going to tell us what we're going to do. Thank
I
you.
will come up and.
Because I'm like, what do we do?
Okay. So what we have here
Page
with Ray.
972.
With Ray moving out of the borough, we have a vacancy by termination of residency, not a vacancy by resignation, which we have seen before. So under the borough code, we have 30 days to fill the vacancy by resolution. So we have a short window. In the past, we have advertised the vacancy, conducted interviews, and appointed. So obviously, the person to be appointed must be a resident of the borough for 1 year.
And that
And
ward.
ward three.
And that ward, so.
When does the clock start?
Should start next week when we have, it's not on tonight's agenda, correct?
The clock started yesterday.
Oh, it starts when he sent the letter in?
Not when we accept it?
Don't we have to
Right,
accept
well, there's
it?
no acceptance. He moved out of the borough. So
Oh,
he's-
I thought.
Sorry.
He forced our hand.
I can rent him a place for a month.
Ward 3?
I don't know anything in Ward 3.
So that's why it's urgent.
So if that person gets appointed next month, do they have to run then in November?
No, because the next municipal election is less than 60 days.
Oh, okay, all right. It had to be something.
Right.
All right, thank you.
And was Ray's term up?
No.
I didn't think
No,
so.
he had
So
two
he's finishing
more
out
They
his
still,
term.
No.
they would still run in the next municipal
Yeah, they're
election
still
if
running
it-
next
If it wasn't
election.
so close.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
So-
I'm glad,
Rather than finish his
he's-
term.
I'm glad he's doing better and whatever, but he's.
So we just have to,
Do you need-
but it is somebody from that ward.
Yeah, it has to be somebody from that ward.
So we'll advertise,
It's been
where
a
will we
resident for a
advertise?
year. When does the year start?
From the date of appointment,
So when they would take office?
when we would appoint them.
Right.
Okay.
Where will we advertise?
I guess the website.
Where?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are those legal?
Probably
What about the
also,
paper?
No,
I would
there's
say
not.
the merchandise or the inside.
Facebook? Don't you
Does
have,
anybody read the
we have to
merchandise?
We have a
advertise?
lot of older
on
residents,
website?
and yes, they read newspapers.
Well, I read newspapers, I don't read the merchandiser.
They only
I don't.
post.
Stuff
Why
like, I
would
wouldn't have
people-
known about the water thing.
So it doesn't sound like the merchandiser, there'd be
It's all
enough time,
pictures
I'm
of
not
it.
sure.
Or the evening sun, but I mean, we should put it somewhere that people who are not online reasonably may see it.
Okay, as many places as we
As many places as
reasonably
you can.
can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we need to select a date
Tell them the
now?
pay is great, benefits are wonderful.
The hours
We
are
use
minimal.
date for the meeting.
We need a date for the interview?
I've been renting my basement.
Well,
to
the
Bobby
date for the
Hall's
meeting has to be within 30 days of yesterday.
Yes, we need a special meeting.
We do.
Okay.
Yay. So that has to be
And
advertised.
that has to be a
It does.
quorum of council.
And
And
what's the
you all
window?
have to agree to it.
What's the advertising? How long do you do it? A week ahead of time?
24 hours in advance.
So
But we
especially-
we need to set the
That's what you're
date.
saying, right? Be in- Within 30 days.
Yes.
Tonight, we need
Yeah.
to set.
Let's pick it.
Set the
Let's
date,
put a
but
date.
my question is, what if you get no one?
If we have no one,
We go to
then
jail.
it goes to the vacancy board,
Yeah.
and they have 15 days.
That we don't have.
Well, we do. We'd have to appoint a vacancy board, and then If the vacancy board does not appoint, then it goes to the Court of Common Pleas.
Oh, this gets fun.
So the answer is you got to have somebody.
Maybe
See
October
what
11th, 12th. Do you have a possible date? I mean, we have to do it before the 13th. Is it the 13th he resigned? 13th of September?
No, the letter's dated the 14th.
Oh,
So
14th.
do you want
Yesterday.
October?
And he moved yesterday. The closing date was yesterday, so that
That's the
would be the.
14th. Okay, so we have to,
We need to.
There's 30
we
days
also
in
need to have a
September, so
special
that gives
council
us.
meeting then to fill the vacancy prior to 30 days, correct?
Right, I thought you would do the interviews
And then, yes, same night.
Same night?
Okay, yes.
Oh, same
yes.
night.
One-stop shop.
So the week of the
Wednesdays?
10th.
yeah. What about the,
October 13th?
You can, I'm not here, but that's
About the
fine.
12th.
I don't need to.
Well, you could be on the phone.
what about Tuesday the 12th?
I think I've done that before.
Words.
We'd have, or
Tuesday, October 12th?
Wednesday,
Actually,
we have
I'm-
a finance meeting? Wow.
Actually, I'm on
13th,
vacation,
the week
but I
of the
can make
11th
it
is pretty
work.
free. Finance next month's the 20th.
Oh, good.
Well, you
Okay.
know, it would be, could we incorporate it into an existing meeting that we're already having? That would be convenient.
I mean, during budget season, finance meetings are already at least 3 hours long.
Yeah.
So I would not tack it
Oh,
onto a finance
and
workshop.
finance is after the 14th next month, so it's, yeah, it's got to be,
What about the 12th?
yep. 12th it is.
October 12th. Is that the Wednesday?
October 12th?
It's Tuesday.
Tuesday, October 12th.
7 o'clock?
7th,
Maybe,
yes.
hopefully
You'll be
a lot of
doing
people-
interviews, so.
Yep.
Okay.
Great, I'll be here 3 nights out of the week.
Do you want it at 6 since you're doing interviews?
Okay, 6, sure. Let's hope we have a lot of people to interview. Okay, let's hope so. All right, 6 o'clock, all right. October
Yeah.
12th.
Is there a quorum?
I won't be there.
I can be there.
Yeah, wait a minute, let's talk about this for a second. 6
make sure
o'clock is
people-
like, it'd be difficult to get there.
So you want to do 7?
So, is the date or the time?
It's the time.
Okay.
I have a board meeting at 6.
I had a feeling, it's almost got to be after.
Well, could you be here by 7?
Oh, yeah,
Your board
7.
meetings don't last long.
20
Yeah.
minutes.
So who, someone does
Okay, then we'd have
I'm
10.
fine with whatever, yeah.
All right, sorry,
Let's
Dory,
do
we're back
7.
at 7.
Thank you.
On the 12th.
It's a very important issue.
Well,
Yeah.
it looks like it, yes, but we'll want to
think we
check
will.
that
I'll
out.
be there, yeah, but Janine said she was going to be there. He said he was going to be there, so.
Kim can be there.
Bill's going to be there, Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a
I
quorum.
think we do.
Right,
Okay.
we've got a plan.
Thank you, solicitor.
All right, thank you for your help. Next thing on the list there, we have to appoint an alternate member. Nody has agreed to be on the tax appeals board since Ray was on that and Ray's no longer here. We need someone. Doty has agreed to be that someone. So we need a motion to approve Mrs. Funk to go to the tax appeals board. Someone make that motion. Scott, thank you. Second?
Second.
Chuck, thank you. Yeah,
Can I ask you a question? Who was the,
Ray.
it was Brad.
Ray. So all in favor of appointing Doty to the tax appeals board, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations. I'm happy that you're accepting the new job. Thank you. Now we need an alternate member in case somebody else leaves. So we have an alternate member in case someone can't be present for some of those tax appeal boards.
I would just specify that normally those appeals are held in the morning here during the work week. So
I don't very
you would need
often.
to- No, they are sparingly, but
Yeah.
they typically would occur in the morning.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Rupp.
I'm already on that. Let's do Scott.
I say Scott,
I
because
think
he loves
Scott.
mornings.
Scott could do the morning.
Nominate Dr.
Not a
Scott.
morning kind of guy. It's
But I
gonna be
think you
after
should
10
do
when
it.
the sun's warm.
Well, 10 in the morning?
Surprises me.
It's like 10.
It works.
Like at 9 or 10.
I agree with Scott.
Someone
We don't
got to
nominate. Can I
nominate
nominate
Scott.
myself?
No, I will do it.
Second to Scott. All in favor of having Scott be the alternate to the tax appeals board, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Scott, for your service. Thank you very much. All right. Next on the agenda is,
Sorry, Heather. Question, did you get it?
I think I got it.
Okay.
the Fire Commission asking for some direction on the scope of work for development of the business plan. I think you're going to lead us off with that?
Yes. Last month, we sent a letter to Penn Township asking the Township Board of Commissioners if they were interested in working with us to develop a business plan for the future of the Fire Commission. And this was to be a projection of future costs and modeling of future costs related to labor as well as organizational alternatives. Penn Township declined to participate, and their preference was to move forward with implementation steps. As there was no business plan to begin with, it seemed like a wise move, we thought, but Penn Township was not interested. However, if you are interested, I would like any comments you have that might be an emphasis for the scope of work. So if you're interested in going forward with such a study, it will be funded under our stamp, partially under our stamp grant, already in the chute for that. And just want to hear what your thoughts are.
I would, if we're going to do it, and I'm not big on studies, but I would like to see the board of the fire commission come back with their proposal of what to be done, and we can build or critique and tweak that, because, Bill, you're on the...
We are, but they're reluctant to provide that.
Didn't Mr. Elstrom present something?
In an email.
What's that?
His plan was an implementation plan. His plan was steps toward a merger.
Not
Our-
a business plan.
Not a study.
No, our response was, well, let's first take a look
Right.
at what those steps are going to
Thank you.
cost. He was a step ahead of us.
Okay.
So
Can
we're
he
going to
lead
combine
that?
them?
Or with our direction, or you're not confident with that?
Mr. Ricard is
Yeah, I
our
would count on
representative.
Bill's comments. He's
Not confident in his ability to represent our interests. This is looking at what is best for how we provide those fire and emergency services for borough residents.
Well, I felt the letter that went to Penn Township already outlined what the study would do.
It did,
And I don't think there's anything more.
If you like the letter, then yeah. I
Yeah,
guess
I
the
think
question is more, is there anything to add to it that we may
Anything
have
to add,
missed?
and whether to do it at all.
I think there's 2
Do
points,
it.
and I don't know if they were there or not, but I have had this, we need to decide how do we increase our revenue? And that would be with putting out fires, being able to get insurance money or something, which other municipalities or other fire departments do, and we do not. And I'd be willing to help with that, with my fire.
I think the chief pointed out a number of holes that I think we should be going with, but with this
Right.
study, I think we need to
The
build that
study would
into.
help us. I think the study would help.
And some of the
And
points
the
that
other
were
thing
brought
with
up
the-
should be built into it.
Right,
Yeah.
and the other thing with the EMS, we tell the hospital, so I don't know that much about it, but what I understand is they've come through and taken all the
Taken
gravy
the-
and left us with the proverbial grizzle.
Yes.
And I hate that analogy, but if that's the case, maybe we say, well, then here, you can have the whole damn thing, and we're out.
But wouldn't the study provide us with
That's what
some
they want.
alternatives, maybe at the end? That would be
Yeah,
part of the
I
direction,
would
provide
think.
some alternatives.
And you're one of those hospital board people, you're part of the problem.
I don't get involved, we don't get involved in the weeds, sorry. Don't know anything about that.
But, yeah, if we get
I
the
think-
revenue
I think we go
pieces,
with
I
what
think
the
you're
letter
okay.
was.
I think we do with the
Okay.
letter, right.
So we go forward.
Yeah,
We go
okay,
forward.
good.
I think,
All right.
one other thing, we need to find a way to build confidence in both organizations in the fire commission if this is going to work, because everything I hear says, well, it's all okay, but, those guys over there, they don't know shit. And I don't think that's,
An independent person may help us with the study,
yeah.
hopefully.
I think we should make sure they understand that.
Right,
We can brief them. It'd be a proposal.
yeah. Right, okay, we good on that?
We
All
are.
right. If you recall, I think it was last month, the chief brought to us some information about the co-responder program. And then there's information here, and we're asking for your approval to authorize the memo of understanding with Wellspan regarding the co-responder program.
And I would move forward with that. I just want to understand if we have any liability. So I would make a motion to approve that, and then a discussion.
Okay.
I can
Do I have a
ask
second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you. I've got a dive route. I second, okay.
Come on,
That's
guys.
my limit tonight.
Okay, are you? Okay. Now your question, Scott.
This is my understanding. Chad's not here. Oh, sorry. This is, I'm going to, it's like send a social worker out where necessary type of thing. So am I understanding that?
Yeah, with regards to mental health. So essentially, primarily what they do now, we have CIT officers They go out, and when they go out to a mental health call, they complete a CIT form, which is faxed to the county mental health, your county's mental health. That responder right now goes out and does follow-up work with that individual to try to get them resources.
Okay.
Essentially what this brings to the table is that they are now working in the Hanover area out of one of 3 police departments. And when a police officer gets dispatched a call, they determine the need the co-responder would be beneficial and to see the safe, they would then respond on their own to that scene to take over.
So this would be incremental to our work, not instead of, essentially?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so there's no liability to us anywhere in any of this?
I've had maybe the solicitor can answer a little bit better. He's reviewed the MOU. I've contacted the insurance company today. They seem that everything, questions that Attorney Schultz has asked is in play and copacetic, as far as my understanding. There were 2 minor suggestions that Attorney Schultz recommended, which was forwarded back to the powers to be with the MOU.
And the county's paying for this, right?
The employee is a well-spanned employee.
Okay, so there's no cost to us?
No, other than some electricity.
So you're,
I have no objection to it based on
thank you.
workers' advice.
Yeah, it may solve some problems,
Oh.
The worst thing we could do is something
Yeah,
good,
like I said, I
right?
think down the line, they're looking to streamline the mental health 302 process.
Right.
Taking it out of the hospital, using the co-responder with that.
And some of the numbers that you provide or somebody provided in a memo are pretty good in terms of really helping people who have some issues, mental health issues.
Yeah.
So that'd be good. All right, so a motion's on the table and it's been seconded. All in favor of that memo of understanding with WellSpan, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
Our Public Works Department, want to talk about holiday parking?
Sure, we'll make this real quick. So
Please.
before the Main Street Hanover and the Christmas Committee presented expanding the downtown free parking over the holiday season, we worked together and kind of pared that back a little bit to make it still work within our current system and for the police to be able to enforce. So what this memo requests for movement from council is that Fridays and Saturdays from November 26th till January 1st are free parking, and that we request from Main Street and the Christmas Committee to see if they can sponsor to help offset approximately $2,800 in parking meter revenue.
I'd make that motion.
Any questions? Do we need a motion for that?
Scott
To
just
move
gave
that?
it to you.
Huh?
Scott just
I
gave
made
it.
a
Scott did?
motion if that's
Okay, and
appropriate.
you second it?
Yes, I
All
did.
right, all in favor of that, issue by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that one's done. The second one?
So B and C will be together here. We set this all up real nicely last finance meeting last month with vehicles and equipment and finance rates and all that kind of good stuff. So anyway, you'll see in your memo, we're going to ask for movement this month as we requested last month. One of them was on the Ford vehicles that are in the capital plan as the government discount substantially decreases after the month of September. Same way with ordering grant vehicles, so that we can still get them at their current rates, and then approving some of the items that we're going to lease out of the capital budget. As Sam presented earlier, the capital budget is basically flat, and that was the goal of creating that program and kind of keeping that steady as we move through the years. It is important to note what you are voting on is not spending money now for the 2022 budget. You're voting on ordering and placing our order for these things now so that we can lock in equipment delivery times, finance rates, metal prices, those kind of things that we all kind of covered a little more in depth last month. So as those kind of things continue to rise, conversely, interest rates are very low. Director Miller gave the example of the last one we found was 1.35%. So we think it's...
Is that the best you can do?
Yeah, second.
Second.
All
Yeah.
in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
One,
Great.
Good. One question for that, though, on this page 5 of 6, Sam, of this mega spreadsheet. You start talking about a 4.5% interest rate on a Mack tandem rear loader refuse truck? Is that?
4.5 is the general percent we had in the capital plan. We've seen higher rates than that in
So that's
probably
just an
about 8 years
average.
back. It's
Okay.
a higher end average, and on a per vehicle basis, the difference between the 4 and the 1 is several thousand. But obviously, it gives us a basis that in case interest rates, when they do resume their normal course of action, which will occur, we have a plan that will meet that need.
Okay.
So
Just wanted to.
it's gravy.
Yeah,
And I'll
the
describe
4.5
some of the
seemed
actual
high
rates.
just on our conversation. I just want you to know I looked at all those spreadsheets you did.
Sure. The next item on our agenda is a memo of agreement between the Army Corps of Engineers, PA Historic Preservation Officer, and Borough regarding preservation of historic features and related signage at Shepherd Myers Dam, and authorizing the borough manager to sign this. That information was in our packet, and does anyone have any questions?
No.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Bill?
I'll second.
Bill, Tim, thank you. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And next, the Water Sewer Committee is making the following recommendations to us. The contract again at Fleming for design, permitting, and bidding. The Kitzmiller Dam, all bulk water wireless reader system, a purchase of a cost not to exceed $3,500, and a contract with again Fleming also for feasibility study at a cost of $39,400 to improve accessibility of water. Any comments to make about that, Eric?
When you say Kitzmiller Dam, you really mean the inlet, correct?
No, the dam.
It's
the dam.
It's
Well,
a small
the
low-end
dam.
feature where
It's a small dam.
it serves as a dam for an inlet. But
Got it.
just before I'll make the motion, I just want to point out to council that all of these came here previously
committee.
and have now gone back to the Water and Sewer Committee, and Water and Sewer Committee is bringing them back to you favorably. With that being said, I'd like to make the motion for approval of all three.
Second, yeah.
Thank you. All in favor indicate of approving all three of those items on the Water Sewer Committee, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All those motions carry. Thank you. And Governance Committee, the Governance Committee did discuss twice the council staff relations policy and approved that and bringing it to the attention of the council. Chris, anything you want to say about that?
Well, that was one of the things that we had requests to take that back to the council, to the governance committee. That was part of the request that came in along with the social media policy that they wanted to look at that and review that as well. So that was our whole premise for the October meeting to be scheduled.
Right.
You want a
So
motion?
you want to make are you making a motion to approve that policy, Chris?
Well, no, you guys wanted to discuss it some more. Is that what the deal was?
Yeah.
My understanding was we have to take it back to committee, so I
But
would.
back to the committee has approved it. The committee is recommending it to the
I
council.
thought it went back to the committee, and the committee was going to meet in October about it.
Yeah.
No, this one, we talked about this one twice. The governance committee, the one regarding council and staff back.
Oh, council and staff.
We talked about that
It's
twice.
just council and staff, it's not the social media one.
No. we
Okay,
talked
are
about
you
that
guys
twice.
both good with that then? Okay.
Well, the
Are you
concern.
guys good with, okay, I thought you had concern about this.
My
Oh,
concern.
we do. Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, I have questions, and I personally wanted it taken back to committee just to restudy it, because
We did
I
that.
did, huh?
We did that.
No,
Are you
we
talking
didn't.
about the one for?
We took
do it
it
in
through,
October.
but then we realized there were more questions we had, so that's why we just wanted to go one more month
And we did.
for October, okay, to set it up for October, just to take it back to committee. So we can, I have questions, and I'd like to check it out even further.
You're talking
Somehow
about
I had it totally mixed up between the Pennsylvania ethics and the Borough Code, and I needed time to study it. I think there were some other ones that had questions about it. I mean, I don't know if they want to speak up about it, but in order to put this before you for approval, okay, I want to be without question, and I do have questions.
I make a motion to approve the council staff relations policy.
That's a policy for borough council and staff.
Correct.
I'll second it.
You're seconding that motion?
That one
Yeah.
cleared up. That one was good,
What?
right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, this
It
one was all
was.
good.
We
It has nothing to do with social media.
Got a motion, got a
discussed that
second.
twice.
Take a vote now.
There's a motion on the table, but there may be there's a motion on the table
seconded.
to approve that.
Yeah.
All right, but just a clarification, that committee did talk about this policy twice.
We
We approved it once, and then there were questions, we went back and
looked
talked about
at
it a
it,
second
and
time.
yeah, we had our committee meeting, and
And we approved it to bring
and
it here.
we did.
So that's why it's here.
And then afterwards, it was going back over because there was a confusion
Oh.
with, between ethics, the ethics and the borough code. And I just wanted to take it back for October. I mean, that's why we wanted, and social media, we have to go over that, we have to refine.
That's not here, that social media is not on the agenda, it's just the one with the council members.
Oh, whether we want to approve it or not, is that what you need?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, well then, sorry.
That's
I
okay,
apologize.
that's
I
okay.
apologize. It's
No,
getting
that's
late,
okay.
yeah.
I think I got confused with social
So
media.
we're going to go around and we're going
That
to
was set up.
approve or
And we're good.
disapprove.
Right, we already had a motion to approve, there's a
And a
motion.
second.
We have-
Just that everything goes through Nan.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Right.
Yeah.
My,
So it's been moved and seconded. Can we vote on it?
Can we vote, all right, the
can
question,
we get a discussion or not?
you have a question?
I have a question. My feeling, and again, it's from the private sector, and my experience is for example, if Nan would be responsible for everything, obviously, things go through her. But if she were hiring a direct report, an executive level staff member, the council would have opportunity to interview, and on her performance evaluations, the council would, for her direct reports, the council would have opportunities, they would be presented to council prior to the employees. So there's a level of oversight by the government.
This has
Nothing to do with this.
This is just.
This says you
No.
can't call up the codes guy and say, hey,
No.
give me a pass on this.
This-
That's
Okay,
what
then-
this policy says.
No,
It
there
has
was-
nothing to do
It
with
shows you
hiring.
can't take the code guys to
Wait,
lunch.
let's
and
just
try to
speak
stay
one at a
true.
time. Let's just
Well,
help.
that doesn't work. I got to take them to lunch, though, I get
Yeah,
everything
you
for
tried.
free.
Just a clarification, Scott, it's one that just talks about how borough council members and staff
Well, then,
relate to
I'm
staff.
not
Nothing to do
exactly
with
sure what the
evaluation.
latest, okay, I'm not exactly sure with what the latest revision of it is. If it's only
It's the
talking
same.
to staff
Right.
members,
It didn't change. After we went back second time to talk about it, it didn't change.
well, when we had the emotional meeting last Wednesday, I thought there were three things there.
No.
It's why it's here. It's why it's on this agenda,
Yeah, it did.
because we
Are
voted
there any other
to move it
questions?
here.
Do we vote? Yes.
Then can we just vote? Are there any questions? All in favor of approval of this policy, the one that has the, is to approve the guidance for the borough council and staff, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed?
We have two
Do I have an
Two opposed.
Opposed? Mrs. Scott?
Sounded like the
Okay.
motion.
I think
All right.
Chris also opposed. Somebody
All right.
over there opposed.
Did we?
No.
No, okay. Oh,
Voted no.
I thought I heard.
so,
That's an
it
opposed.
did,
I was opposed.
you were opposition.
opposed.
Okay,
That's all I-
thank you, Scott. All right,
Mrs. Spunk and Mr. Rowland voted in opposition, is that correct?
yes.
I did, yes.
Counselor Locker, were you for or against?
You voted for it?
Yes or no?
I'm totally confused at this point, but
This was just.
it doesn't really matter how I vote, so I guess I'll
It
just.
does,
yes.
it does.
matters.
We're in a vote.
Yeah, it's it's not the social media policy.
So it's not the social media policy, but getting back to the question that Scott had about whether or not direct reports to the borough manager, that was the question that Scott and Darlene had, when whether or not that's included in this policy or not.
No, it's not in here.
If it's not, then I
in
guess
this
No,
you're-
no, no, it said that it was borough code, but I'm not sure. I thought it was under the ethics, and so when I approved it, I didn't thoroughly understand what I was approving. Okay, that's what I'm saying, Bart, okay? And I just wanted to go back and revisit, and I don't know what the harm of it is and why we're pushing so hard to push something through. I know,
That's what's wrong.
I admit, I did not understand it thoroughly. And so I was taking it under another assumption, okay? And then realize, and then other ones were expressing that
All
they
this
were
had to do
having
with-
problems.
Let me just, said I'm on the
Yes,
council,
Tim,
or on that
go.
committee.
Go,
All
Tim.
this had to do with
Yeah.
was, if I want to talk to
Yeah, that's all.
AJ, I'm going to send an email to her, and she's going to dictate it to AJ.
Okay, then we're talking two different things.
That's all this was about.
This is only relationships between borough council members and staff.
How we
It's what Tim
contact
says. You go through Nan,
The other
period.
staff. Everybody goes through Nan.
Okay, well, that's all it is, then I
That's
guess
all it
maybe you're
is.
All it
looking,
is.
unless you guys are looking into it deeper than what it actually is.
But we voted
I
on
don't
it and it
know.
just passed, that it's moving on to become policy.
Okay,
It passed.
all right, we're-
No need for any further discussion, it passed.
We're up to at least, I'll
Okay.
meet you at all this.
All right,
All right, let's get.
okay. Reports of, any reports of council members, council committees, or any other public bodies at this time? Management reports are included in your packet. Any correspondence and information?
There was 3 letters somewhere sitting around here I saw. I didn't read them yet, but.
They're definitely worth reading, I'll give you that. But I'll check them out.
Sure they are.
Letters that came to our attention, Scott?
There's one from Ray, there's one from Andy Smith,
Oh, I didn't
and
see that, not right.
there's one from Hanover against hunger.
Okay. You need to read them
That
now?
they need to be
Okay, all right.
Read it through right now.
read through.
So read the correspondence that came to your attention. All right. And this is an opportunity for any additional public comment. Justine, it appears you're with us. Any comment you would like to make?
Word person.
No, no comment, thank you.
Thank you for hanging in there with us, Justine. Any public comment here? Please pay attention, take a look at the next meetings that are scheduled. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Thank you, Bill. And second that, even though, all in favor, give it saying aye. We are adjourned at 9:55.